Welcome back, everyone. I'm not sure what that's welcome back, everyone. We're gonna begin now, and we're gonna talk about, what we do as cloud architects, what we do as solutions architects, what we do for the most part as enterprise architects or AI architects. We'll discuss this for about 30 minutes, and then after this, we're gonna spend time answering any technology career questions you may have. They can be about cloud engineering, they can be about cloud architecture, network engineering, network architecture. It doesn't matter. I've been a career coach for more than 20 years, and I want to help you get the best career you want. But people kept asking about what does a cloud architect actually do, and we're going to cover that now. And I'll give you some examples of what we do, how we do it, why we do it. I will talk about why this is the most misunderstood career out there. And honestly, architecture careers, everybody understood them. And then what happened is a cloud provider or two actually made a name of a certification called the solution architecture, and it had nothing to do with solution architecture. It had everything to do with systems administration. So a little bit about me, if you don't know me when I talk about it, I've been an architect now for over 25 years. I was a lead architect for an entire healthcare vertical over at Cisco, an enterprise architect. I was a principal architect at Riverstone Networks, the old Cabletron, which is now Nokia. I was a principal 2 architect over at Comcast. I was a lead architect at MCI WorldCom, Verizon, and I've done some other architecture work as well. So in addition to my 25 years in architecture, I've spent more than 2 decades helping people like you get your first tech job, get promoted in tech, you name it, negotiate a raise. That's sort of what I do, and it's what I love to do. So we'll talk about what we actually do as cloud architects. If you want, while we're at it, I'll talk about why it's one of the best careers for 2024 and beyond. I'll even talk about the skills that you need to be an architect. And at that point, I think you'll have an understanding of the career. So, what is a cloud architect? It is not an engineer. We don't touch the tech. And also from my team, Mark Milovanovich is also here, and he'll join me shortly when we get to the question and answer sessions. Mark Milovanovich is our rock star in technology. He's our chief technology officer. Like me, he's also a Cisco certified internet expert. But the architect itself, we are not engineers. We are hybrid people. And why do I say we're hybrid? We're about 2/3 executive and 1/3 technology professional. Now, architecture is a strategic planning career. I'm going to say that again. Architecture is a strategic planning career. Engineering is a hands-on building career. Administration is a hands-on technician career. So planners, we architects are planners. The same way if you wanted a skyscraper made in a city, you would call an architect to design it, and they'd ask you what you want, how many pools, how many golf courses, whether it's a 3-star hotel, a 4-star hotel, a 5-star hotel, and they create a blueprint for it. And then after they're done creating the blueprint, the architect gets paid and a construction crew comes in and builds it. It's the same thing in tech. Architects design, we plan, but we don't build. And that's one of the reasons when I have cloud engineers or network engineers, I have to train them for cloud architecture because their job will not prepare them at all when we're going to design a system. And that's why nobody asks a construction worker to design a building. The people that know the systems on the airplanes best are the airplane mechanics. But guess what? They don't actually fly the airplane. So we have to understand the difference. So what do we actually do? It all starts out with us when a company comes to us and says, we would like to do something differently. We would like to implement, say, AI to assist our salespeople. We would like to create a new network between our Asian offices and our US offices because we want to do more in Asia. It all starts out with a business need and a business goal. It's the exact opposite of engineering, which is how do I build it? How do I tune it? How do I optimize it? Architecture is about what problems are we solving? So how does an architect know what to do? Well, realistically speaking, if we're a good architect and we have the right skills, we start with the client's executive team. Go to that CEO, the chief executive officer, the chief information officer, the chief operating officer, and really learn their business. What are their business goals? What are their business pain points? What are their business challenges? What are their competitors doing? What is this company's secret sauce, if you will? Now, when we know where the company wants to go, and if we don't know where the company wants to go, how do you design an architecture there? So that's why I can describe it. Which airplane do you get on when you want to go somewhere? Well, I don't know. You got to determine your destination. And that's why the architect typically starts with the leadership and ideally the C-suite. Not always, but ideally the C-suite. Now, the next thing we architects actually have to do is we have to understand the business that we have. How does it operate? How many business units are in there? What does each business unit do? How does decision making occur? For example, what is the organizational chart? What are the business processes that make things get done? Meaning, if there's a product, how is the product created? How is the product serviced? Where do the parts in the supply chain come in? How is the product sold? How is the product supported if and when it breaks? We have to understand the business and the challenges it has. Because if we don't understand the business, guess what? We destroy it. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. So the architect may now spend, the 1 or 2 months, and it's not just going to be one architect, it's going to be many architects in the enterprise environment, analyzing that business that we have, much like the way a management and strategy consultant would. Now, when we understand the company's vision and their business goals and the way the business operates, we have to work with that company to say, does the way your business operates now, will it get you your future goals? And generally, the reason they started a new architecture project is because their business currently won't get them to their goals. And maybe they need a new way to sell a product. Maybe they need a new way to get more intimate with their customers so the customers know them better. Maybe there's a problem in their customer service, but they have to change something to actually get to the goal. So there is that. So that's what we're really talking about. We have to understand their business vision. We have to map out all their business processes, and we have to work with that organization to determine the new business processes that we actually need to get that business to its long-term goal and its long-term vision. Now, after we get to that point where we understand the future business processes, we kind of have to do two things. This is the point where we architects are going to come in and we're going to evaluate the organization's technology. We're going to have to look at what's their network look like, what's their main cloud stuff look like, their private cloud, their multi-cloud, their hybrid cloud. We're going to be examining their data center. We're going to be examining their applications. We're going to be examining their security systems, their voice systems, their video systems, their CRM systems, their ERP systems. And that job of analyzing this data for an enterprise that may have 150,000 people and $5 billion of technology, which is nothing for an enterprise, is going to take a team of people. And typically speaking, when we're at this phase, the architect has to go to their company and they have to request resources from the team of people, show management why they need these resources, quantify their project and the opportunity. And we're going to bring in a team of 15 to 50 people. Now, once we understand the client's technology and we understand the way they want the business to operate in the future, now we need to work backwards from their goals and figure out what changes do we need to make to their technology platforms to get the business to operate the way they want it to in the future. So that's the new technology architecture that we're going to create. Now, that is going to take 3 to 6 months with 15 to 50 people to create that. And as soon as we've created that main architecture, or what we think is going to be an architecture, we now document that architecture. And that means, architectural documents, which will be several hundred pages, which is going to be nothing because you've got a team of 15 to 50 people and you'll divide it in sections, but you're going to lead that. That means diagrams, that means explanations, the total high-level architecture, that mid-tier platform side of architecture, and then that low-level solution type architecture that we'll try to get to. And we'll show that to the customer. We'll present that to key stakeholders, and they're going to say, well, this is good for my business. This hurts my business. We can't do this. I need to change this. I need to change this. So that will lead to a process of 1 to 3 months of what you call stakeholder management. We're going to go back and forth with the stakeholders to tune things and see how they feel about it. We're going to negotiating across stakeholders to get something for that entire enterprise. And then we're going to document it. Now, at this point, once we've got a finalized architecture, we need to do the following thing. we need to basically sell that architecture and create budget to the client, which means building a business case to show how the technology will help their business. It means sales presentations, and you're going to be involved in the sales process. The sales process will be owned by the account manager or the account executive, but you'll be there side by side, helping them sell it. You are the technical strategist, and they are the business strategist that is there. You will also be bringing in the deep techies to help you explain things when the engineers want to get into the weeds, because you can't be in the weeds. You got to be at the high level because you're designing something for business performance, and you're going to be the lead architect. Now, when the customer says, yes, I want to buy this stuff from you, we help create an architecture team and the client that's going to govern the implementation. So who are the key stakeholders that need to be involved in the implementation? We typically bring in a project manager to manage the project, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. We create a strategy about change management and change control. For example, someone wants to change the code on one of the devices. That change can impact the entire business. So we have to create a strategy. Anytime a change needs to occur, what needs to happen? Where does it happen? Who needs to access it? Who needs to test it? What have you? And when they finally say, we're done, guess what? We are done. As soon as that architecture is completed, we go to the next client. We are not engineers. We are not hands-on people. We do not touch the technology. But you don't have to just hear it from me. I'm going to actually share with you, and you'll be able to see the screenshot. This screenshot was taken directly off of the CIO website. Please, Chris, share this. And I'll walk you through what these things actually are based upon the context of what I talked through. So here you can see printed from Gartner did the research, and this is exactly what I've done for the last 25 years, as well as real architects actually do. And Chris from my team will actually share the link for you so you can read this article anytime you want. So what happened is we've all seen these silly job descriptions, which are really a cloud admin or a cloud engineer with an architect title. And, my buddies and I, we used to have a Macallan 25, this nice, smooth scotch. We'd look at job descriptions, and all the architects were like, I've never done that. I've never done that. And it's like, well, clearly they're not going to get an architect. They don't want an architect. They don't want an engineer. And those jobs that actually have hands-on implementation pay nothing compared to what an actual architecture job does, because it's a different skill. So Gartner asked the chief information officers of big companies, what do you want your cloud architects to do? And if you're new to tech and you don't know what the chief information officer is, or you've never worked with the C-suite, the CEO sets the strategy for the business. That's my job. I set the strategy for the business. But what do? I have a chief information officer that basically designs the technology system for my business. The chief information officer hires the VP of IT, the director of IT, all the architects. So your boss is going to be the chief information officer in the company you work for in most cases. So when they're asked, what would you like the architects to do? Here's what they said. Lead the cultural change for cloud adoption. Now, if you'll recall a minute ago, I talked about the architect managing stakeholders across the organization and getting their buy-in and getting their approval and getting their support. That's that leading the cultural change for cloud adoption. Next, developing and coordinating a cloud architecture. What is that? If you'll recall, I talked about examining the organization's business vision and the business and the way the business works. And you heard me talk about creating an architecture team of 15 to 50 people that'll design the cloud strategy, the coordinate the adoption process, the statement of work, what have you. That's that design of the systems, developing and coordinating the cloud architecture. And then they also say developing a cloud strategy and coordinating the adoption process. That's that project planning, that statement of work. So all you've heard so far is lead the cultural change, design and develop the cloud architecture, which is the system design, and developing the cloud strategy and coordinating the adoption process. Now, after this, what else do they want architects to do on a daily basis? Well, we find talent with the necessary skills. We assess applications, hardware, and software. Now, I told you I've interviewed 6,000 people. This is why in every architecture project, I've got to find people with the necessary skills. Maybe I have to do a proof of concept. Architects don't do it. We bring in engineers to do the proof of concept. And we have to manage and lead that proof of concept team. So we're always finding talent with the necessary skills. We're bringing in people to analyze the applications and assess the applications, the software, and the hardware that we might be using. We have to create that cloud broker team. That's that giant team that we have that we're working with that I talked about creation and leading. Establishing best practices across the company. Well, in an architecture, how do you use the systems? How the system's going to work? How do you design for security, availability, performance? That's your best practices. Selecting cloud providers and vetting third-party services. That's where I talked about 98% of organizations being multi-cloud. I talked about not using the cloud native security tools, but getting the industrial security tools from like a Palo Alto, a Cisco, a Fortinet, a Checkpoint, getting some networking code from, say, a vendor like Cisco, dealing with monitoring tools like Splunk. And then it's overseeing governance and mitigating risk. And what is that? So what does that truly mean? It means creating that governance structure for that implementation, creating that change control environment that I talked about when changes have changed. And then it said work closely with IT security people to monitor privacy and develop incident response procedures. Incident response procedures. If the system's hacked, who talks to the press? Where does legal get involved? Who needs to be notified? Manage budgets and manage budgets and estimate costs. Yep, that's talking about building business models. And then poof, operate at scale. So that's what we actually do. And I'll answer all your questions when we're done this. So that's what we do as architects. And why is it probably the best time in the world for architects? Why do we stop selling our cloud engineering program? Why did 2 years ago did I make videos that said get out of engineering? Here's the reason. Every new piece of technology out there creates new jobs for architects. Generative AI, oh, we're creating architectures like crazy. Cloud, new architectures, higher speed networks, new architectures. Why? Because the businesses have an opportunity to leverage these technologies. And all of these technologies, when they're used properly, can truly help our clients' business. And it's the cloud architect, it's the enterprise architect that tie these pieces together. If we don't have these architectural pieces, and we don't focus on the business, and we focus on the tech, like someone said, how do you implement this? And we didn't even know whether it was the right thing to do. That's why McKinsey and others will estimate that more than 70% of all technology projects do nothing for their customers. Because if you don't do this architecture piece that I'm talking about, it's like a doctor that's just handing out pills without knowing what problems they're solving. It's ridiculous. But we make a lot of mistakes in technology, and that's why architects are getting paid so much more. So there's where the cloud architect comes in. They're a strategic position. And the best news is we can't be replaced by AI like engineers. AI can code. Where do you see this new open AI coding model? It's as good, if not better, than most software engineers. And we're only scratching the surface of where we're going to be in AI. You can't imagine it. AI can write a Terraform script. AI can write a Bash shell script. And AI can write a Python script. But you know what AI can't do? Learn the business from the suite of executives. Sell $1 billion architecture, and every architecture I work on is $1 billion plus. Lead a team of 15 to 50 people. Create that statement of work. Understand the business. And that's why architecture careers are immune from AI. AI gives us more jobs. All that schmoozing, all that leadership. So what are the skills while we're at it? And, I'm going to do this. And obviously, when we train people, we train 100% of these skills. And that's why we're able to take people with no experience and get them hired, regardless of what you see on a job description. And if you want, I'll give you examples. But and there's lots of videos on our channel of people with no experience that have gotten hired as architects after our training. It's the business skills and the tech skills that make an architect. They're predominantly business skills. So I'll tell you what the business skills are and why you need them. The first skill we must have is something called CXO relevancy. An engineer, I might be able to talk to them about the LSAs and OSPF, and they're going to get excited. But for the management, they don't care about the technology. They care about what the tech can do for their business. Who actually writes the purchase order or pays for our thing? The C-suite, the chief financial officer to make sure that they have money for their resources, the chief information officer that says yes, the CEO. So you must have to learn how to communicate to the C-suite. It's called CXO relevancy. Obviously, we teach all of these, but I took about $20,000 of training on CXO relevancy. The next is business acumen. If you're going to design a system to improve business performance and all you know is tech, you're not going to be able to help them 7 out of 10 times. You're going to hurt your client. They're going to spend money on your tech and it won't help their business. That hurts them because otherwise they could spend their tech somewhere else. So business acumen. Whether you get an MBA or whether you learn it from our training, you need to know business. The next thing is leadership skills. And this is why I'm starting with the business piece, because they're very important. More of these skills are business. Architects don't design something by themselves. It's like the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. David Lithicum, when I ask him, he says it takes 6 to 12 months. His teams are 15 to 50 people. It takes me 6 to 12 months with teams of 15 to 50 people. We've got to build the team. We've got to lead the team. We've got to motivate the team. And if you can't do that, you're not going to get an architecture. The next thing that we must have here is that we're really talking about is stakeholder management skills, because a significant part of our job is managing stakeholders. The next thing we need to understand is something called sales skills. We'll be constantly selling our architectures. And guess what? It is how much you can sell that is going to determine how big your bonus is. Beyond that, we need communication skills, because why? Nobody hands you a piece of paper and says, Mike, build this. Architects don't build anything. So we are going to have to obtain the requirements, and we're going to have to listen to the little nuances that we have. We're going to have to build a team, lead the team, and get that team to its ultimate goals. So we need strong communication skills. Now, presentations. As an architect, you'll be presenting to executive briefings, which is where they fly the executives in and you and other executives communicate them. You'll be presenting at conferences. You'll be presenting to clients. Now, the next thing you'll need is what's called executive presence. Executive presence is the ability to walk in and command the room. And you'll see it. You'll see people that make videos on LinkedIn, and they basically show you that they're not ready for any job. They come across funny. Their communication is funny. And if, for example, I'll shut off my executive presence. BGP is a path vector routing protocol that uses TCP port 179 in order to connect to external entities. Now, if I said that, I'd literally be kicked out of the room and fired on my architect job. But if I walked in the room and I said, I'm here to help you, BGP is what you actually need to connect to the cloud provider. We use BGP because it gives us performance tuning, it scales well, and it can enable us to enhance the information we pass back and forth to the cloud provider, further enhancing our security. And also included there is vendor management. Why? Because it's never going to be there. We're not going to have an IAM solution that's going to be AWS IAM, for example, in any cloud architecture. Everything we have is going to be dealing with the main authentication systems, things like Active Directory and Federated, and how all those pieces and parts, and how that's going to go to next generation firewalls from security vendors, not the cloud providers. So there's constant vendor management. Now, we've been negotiating every deal with the sales team, so you will have to know how to negotiate, and you'll also have to have emotional intelligence, because 70% of the clients that you actually have done something wrong. Their systems have failed, and you're going to have to go in there, not make them feel bad about their mistakes, and help them. Plus, when you're on your team, you're going to lead a team of 15 to 50 people to design your architecture for 6 to 12 months. One person's going to be going through a divorce. One person's going to be sick, and you're going to have to be able to be emotionally intelligent with those teams. Why did I start with the business skills? Because they are the most critical sides of this. Now, we have to talk about the tech skills too, because you need a good understanding of technology to be an architect, but it's not hands-on. We are not going to code. We don't do Terraform. We don't do sysops. We don't do DevOps. We don't do administration at all. And here's the reality. You cannot learn how to design an enterprise architecture or a cloud architecture by building it. You give me somebody that's done 1,001 hands-on lab projects, and I ask them how to design a recommendation system to help an airline actually improve their fuel option pricing contracts, and they'll fall apart. You give me somebody that's been configuring firewalls for the last 10 years, and I ask them how to design the demilitarized zone for a bank that's got a $10 billion intellectual trade property asset, and they won't be able to. Why? You need to learn how to design, which is completely different than learning how to build. Now, you will also need to understand how the technology works. Now, how the technology works is different than how to build it. How the technology works is understanding how the server that you have, how the 2 CPU cores or 4 CPUs actually hit into the motherboard, understanding the core-to-core communication and what each core actually does, and understanding the level 1 cache, level 2 cache, level 3 cache, and what they actually do. understanding how that feeds in and out of the DRAM and the type of DRAM you need, understanding the number of PCIe lanes on that CPU and the CPUs themselves, and how that pertains to how many GPUs you can pop into that system in order to get maximum performance out of your GPUs for, say, machine learning. It's the knowledge of how systems work and the knowledge of how to put the parts together, not how to. You can do how to all day, every day, and you will never learn this. Which is why I've got people that have literally 10 years of cloud engineering experience, and I've retrained them to be architects. And at the same time, I've taken people like Ivan Tambo or Jordan Kitko or Coyote and gotten them hired by AWS as a solution architect as their first job. Or Delroy Bad, who was working on ambulances, who got his first job within regards to 6 months of our training as a security architect. Or Daniel Bosu, who was a 20-year-old. I love this kid. He was a high school dropout. We trained him for 6 months after getting him out of some boot camp, which taught him how-to stuff, which wasn't relevant. And then we trained him and got him hired by JP Morgan Chase. Or Jennifer Emo, who was a mental health tech hired by JP Morgan Chase. Or Jermaine Houston, who was selling landscaping gear, who got hired by Southern New Hampshire University. Or Balwinder Kerr, who was a stay-at-home mom, who we got her architect job at Microsoft. And I can do this all day long. And that's because architecture is different than engineering, and you need training to be an architect, which is different than engineering. So next, what are the skills you need? You will need network design skills. What are they? Knowing what kind of WAN technology you would use. When would you use a private line? When would you use an IPsec tunnel? When would you use software-defined networking? When would you use SASE? What are the strengths and weaknesses of each approach? How would you design your IP address planning, your subnetting, your supernetting, your route aggregation? Switching, things like spanning tree and rapid spanning tree, and VLANs and VLAN tagging and VLAN trunking and BGP, and how to design and architect your routing. Not compute design skills, meaning, what type of servers and server virtualization platforms should you be using? What type of containers and container orchestration platforms should be using for your control plane versus your data plane where these systems are running? What about functions as a service, like a Lambda function or an Azure function? You will need to have good knowledge of storage area networks, like block storage, objects, file storage, RAID. How do you work around the poor performance of block storage? Because it is incredibly slow despite it being fast in your certification. Go buy a $100 NVMe drive at Best Buy, a Samsung 990 Pro, and it'll give you 1 million IOPS. But the fastest, block storage we can get in Azure is 160,000 IOPS. So kind of keep that. You will need to understand how to design for security, whether it be your demilitarized zone, your security policy, your data loss prevention strategy, your IAM strategy, and your end-to-end encryption strategy. You'll need big data design skills, things like data lakes and relational databases and NoSQL databases and data warehouses and mapping and reduction type functions and how that works. You're going to need cloud design skills. 98% of organizations are multi-cloud. And that means working with private clouds, hybrid multi-clouds, and even AI design skills. So obviously we teach every one of these to our clients. And that's why we're so successful at getting people hired at Apple and Amazon and Cisco and Google and IBM and Microsoft, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Zscalers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase. But those are the skills. We don't touch the technology. In fact, most architects would be fired if they touched the technology of their clients on the spot. They'd be escorted out by security. We design it, we present it, we sell it, we negotiate it, we lead large teams, we build business cases, and we get paid a lot of money to have the absolute best job in the world. I did 3 months of engineering 25 years ago. I moved straight into architecture, and I've never had a day that I didn't love in architecture. So that's what we actually do. Now I'm here to answer any tech career questions you actually have, and I will do anything I can to help you. Chris, bring in some questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. All
right. Oh, by the way, that is Mark Milovanovich. He's our Chief Technology Officer. You want to know a guy that can get deep and geeky on networking? It's Mark. I got deep and geeky on networking for many decades, but Mark's the deep geeky networking person at our company. I'm more the CEO these days. I love networking. I'll get deep geeky with him too, but we want to give you any questions. If it's a business related question, I'll answer it. If you guys have a tech related question, Mark's going to get involved, but we'll do anything we can to help you.
All right. Let's go with the first question from Drifting Tangerine. Creative name. It says, how do I not get the wrong career advice with the plethora of information out there?
Drifting Tangerine, that is a great question. So here's what I'm going to tell you to do. The first is what I call information hygiene, where you get your source. So in my youth, I learned to practice medicine. When it came to medicine, here's where we were taught. We had to go to peer-reviewed journals or expert physicians, people that had been there and recognized on the national stage. Same thing when it comes to technology. Do not ask, and a lot of people go watch YouTube videos of people that have never had a job. Stay away from them. I see all these little people creating little cloud courses and little crowd working things, and they've never done the job before. They will teach you everything dangerous that will cause your career to go bad. I see it every single day that are out there. So that's the first thing. 2, stay out of places where you're going to deal with unknown or unknowable people. Don't go to Reddit. Stay out of these places. Look for people that have a distinguished architect title, a principal architect title. And why do I say distinguished architects or principal architects? Because when you first get hired as an architect, you don't know what you don't know. When you make it to a senior architect, you almost are starting to learn the job. By the time you're successful and you move into these $500,000 architect jobs, you know what mistakes not to make. You probably already made them and you've got there. So listen to distinguished architects, listen to principal architects. I was a principal architect for 25 years. David Linthicum is also on our channel. I highly recommend listening to David Linthicum as well. He's been an architect for about 30 years. So look for people that have made it to the top. Listen to the chief information officer, listen to the chief technology officer, listen to the VP of architecture, even listen to a director of architecture, but do not listen to an engineer on how to be an architect because they don't know. That's like asking a nurse, what a doctor does and how to be a doctor. They just don't know. Stay out of a place where you're going to get silly answers like Reddit. I mean, they're well-meaning people, but they've generally speaking never had the job. Get no information from places like Udemy, because 90% of the contents out there, again, is created by people that have never had the job. So stick with reliable places. I&E, for example, in networking is great. Russ White does some things in networking. And if you don't know Russ White, he's one of your networking people that you want to go to. So go to people like that. I actually, when I was at Cisco, I used to train the architects that worked at Cisco, specifically in service-oriented architectures. It was my job to teach architects. I've been teaching actually architects since 2001. So there's that. But kind of make sure you go from the people that are there. If you look at my on our website, you'll see me in Forbes magazine and DevOps magazine and Information Week and Tech Republic and Tech Radar and every other major publication you can imagine. When you go to CIO magazine, I've been in CIO magazine too, you're going to get people that know. Stay off of the places where the 23-year-old that was there. And also you got to avoid associate architects and associate engineers. I'll tell you what they are, and I've trained so many of them. An associate architect is a trainee. And if they graduate their trainee program, they become a junior, let's say, solution architect. If they don't graduate, they quit or get fired. And I don't know, maybe they start a Twitter channel or something like that, or they work in another career. So stay far away from anybody that's an associate or just got their first job, because they won't know what they did or didn't know.
And you started off your question with wrong. The first question I would ask myself is, how do I know if something is right or wrong to begin with? Mm-hmm. So in case of a career, what you have to identify is what type of position do you want to go after? And then you would have to reverse engineer that position and see what is about a medium point of skill sets that they're asking for. Basically, what's the average of it? Because what you'll find is, and we've had plenty of discussions on this channel and behind the scenes as well in regards to what responsibilities does an architect actually have? And you'll read that some of them says you should be good at Python, you should be good at Terraform, you should be capable of doing proof of concepts or proof of values, depending on what company you're working for. And yet what you'll notice is as you start building this, I call it the scaffolding, right? Because you first want to build some context around the subject before you add the details to it. But what you'll notice is over time that it's really what behavior is being displayed by the different people based on the different jobs. So, and that's how over time you find out as you do this comparison and this evaluation of the skill sets on which side is incorrect and which side is correct. But don't be fooled. Recruiters can be incorrect. Job descriptions will be incorrect.
Always correct.
Job titles will not just be incorrect. Most of the times, they will be very confusing. So you'll have to contrast and compare the different skill sets and take your time doing so. Eventually, you'll be able to funnel down to a skill set that's going to make up that particular career or that particular role that you want to do. And for example, I'm not saying we're the be-all, end-all authority when it comes to architecture, but you can specifically tell that we haven't really changed our tune, unlike larger vendors and other platforms, what an architect's responsibility should really encompass. Yeah. So take your time, build this scaffolding, do the compare and contrast, find out what is right and what is wrong based on what eventually, and then this is where you go into what Mike says, the authorities in the particular domain tell you. And that would be a good starting point.
Sorry, I thought you were paused there, but you can't go by job descriptions because here's how we write job descriptions. No hiring manager has the time. We type something onto Google and go to Indeed, ZipRecruiter, Dice. We cut and paste something, and then we say none of this is what we need. And then we add what we need. We put it up there, and then the next person does that. I've never had more than 10% of the skills in a job description, and quite frankly, I've never been on an interview where I didn't get the job. And in most cases, well, 40% of cases, I've taken 5 jobs, and in 2 out of the 5, I got a better job than the one I actually interviewed for. So, and it's happened to my students as well, even with no experience. So make sure you're prepared for the job. So it's a great question you asked. I'm glad you asked it.
All right. The next question is from Carlos. How does the enterprise architect role compare to a digital transformation consultant? And does the enterprise architect program prepare you for both, or are they distinct skills required for each?
Okay, the enterprise architect is a souped up version, a higher paid version, a better paid version of a digital transformation consultant. You can hear enterprise architects called chief architect, and these are $800,000 plus positions, chief technology officer, enterprise architect, digital transformation consultant. It's all the same job. But in the enterprise architecture world, you're typically working a little more with the C-suite when you're there. Does our enterprise architect program prepare you for both? It prepares you for CIO roles, CTO roles, enterprise architect roles, and even digital transformation consultants. And people in our enterprise architects could also take a more junior role like a cloud architect as well, because we also provide a lot of tech training there. So the answer is absolutely yeah. But the key of any of these digital transformation roles or enterprise architect roles, we're bombarded with what you call, the nonsense that the vendors put out there. Buy my stuff, it's going to help you. Buy my stuff, it's going to help you. Buy. And then when you actually peel back the onion and you actually look at the things the vendors are selling, it's the same technology we've had for 25 years with a brand new name on it, but that's it. So the point of having these digital transformation consultants and strategy consultants and business architects and enterprise architects, all in many cases are the same role, is we want someone that's going to look at that vision. We want someone that's going to focus on the way the business operates and making sure that organization gets something out of the technology. That's this. And of course, our roles prepare you for all. Look, I had I had Thule recently, who was never worked in tech before. He took our training program and he got his first job as a chief technology officer. So why? Because he understood that digital transformation over in London. I was in Manchester, he got hired. But because he understood that digital transformation piece and he understood that organization's business goals and he could build those strategic plans. So any of these architecture careers are there. Now, if a company doesn't have an enterprise architect and they have a cloud architect and that's their lead, then that cloud architect ends up doing the digital transformation enterprise architecture. So you can think of your enterprise architect as your top level architect. You can think of the bottom level architects as the solution architects because they're more tech focused. And you can think of the platform architect like the cloud architect or the network architect at that mid tier. Kind of hope that helps.
Yeah, and I'll add something here to this. When you think about enterprise architecture, for example, to me it means that I'm focused on the business strategies and how do I make sure that the technology actually aligns to those business strategies. When it comes to digital transformation consultant, my mind goes more towards how would I work on the adoption and integrations of this strategy as laid out by the enterprise architect. So they will have overlapping skill sets or qualities, such as managing stakeholders, having leadership skills, being able to basically sell and present a particular solution. Even if it is not directly to the stakeholders, you do have to do so with the rest of the team, which could involve project manager, product managers, engineers. You will have sales engineers, which also you can call solutions engineers, or believe it or not, many of those titles that you see out there, solution architects, are actually solution engineers or sales engineers more than actual what we consider architects. So there's overlap there, but I would consider that an enterprise architect is still more focused on the business, aligning that to the strategies of that with the technology, compared to how do I actually get this into the business now, working with the technology, and how do I get the rest of the team online to do this for me.
And we have to be very careful here on the term solutions architect. And the reason we have to, if you worked at a solutions architect, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, JP Morgan Chase Bank, Barclays Bank, AWS, Cisco, IBM, you will not be allowed to touch the technology. It's not yours. For proof of concept, you'll be bringing in engineers. So when you see a solution architect that's got hands-on, it's not a solution architect at all. It's really a systems engineer with that title. And why do they do that? Because they looked at the solution architect certification and said, oh, this is kind of what we need, that hands-on junior level technician. But it's not what we do as architects.
Great. Let's go on to the next question from Dingleman1. What is a good compensation package for a security architect when considering commission percentage, bonus percentage, and perhaps travel expense and so forth?
Okay, so Dingleman, and I know you and I know where you're working because we worked with you and you have a great job. So it's going to be based upon, so I'm going to answer this qualitatively, and I'm going to make it based upon the lessons that I had to learn the hard way. So the closer you're going to be to the technology, Dingleman, the less you're going to earn. The further away you are and the more strategic you are, the more you're going to be able to learn. So I'll break it down for you. I remember 25 years ago, I had a manager. I was working as a solutions architect in networking, and I was taking the CISSP boot camp, and I fell asleep in the boot camp. My manager pulled me out. He pulled me to his office. And, 25 years ago, it was a low-paying job. I had taken like a $148,000 job, and that's low compared to solutions architects were. And my manager said to me, and he's like, Gibbs, you look bored. I said, I am. And he says, Mike, I've been watching you. He said, I've watched you present. I've watched you lead. I've watched you coach others on architecture. And he said, this solution architect role is kind of beneath you. And he said, do you want to know the difference between that $150,000 network architect like you are now and that $300,000 enterprise-y type architect? And this was 25 years ago. So you can imagine now it's like $700,000-$800,000 equivalent. And I said, tell me. And he said, Mike, all of this is about the impact that you make. He said, how do you make a greater impact on your client? You learn business. You can convince the client to adopt the right strategy. Security needs a good strategy, and most people don't want to spend the money on security. So strategy. He said, it's about your ability to lead. He said, it's about your executive presence, about you being able to walk into that room with the CEO and the CFO and the CIO and create that $1 billion budget. He said, you do that, you'll be a $300,000 architect. And he said, oh, you want to start your MBA? Want to go to leadership training and training to exercise influence and training to present and sell? And I'm like, yeah. So I trained in that. About a year and a half later, I had that big role that he was telling me. So I'd say about 200 to 300 is normal compensation for a good security architect. But here's the big but. If you become more polished, if you have more executive leadership. And if you can walk into that client as a principal security architect and really influence them and quantify the types of security risks they have and show them your calculations and how you got to the calculations, and you create a good risk mitigation plan for them and a good security policy, now you're a $500,000 architect. So it depends where you want to go. If you're a lover of the tech, it's going to be in the lower end, 200, 250. If you're a lover at making your clients more successful, it can be 500 or more. So that's really where you choose to do it. Personally, I focus on the business. When I was younger, to me, I like the tech. So there's that.
Sounds good. Let us go to the next question. And it's from, and again, I apologize in advance if I mispronounce your names. I believe it's VJ or Villar. And the question is the product manager role a stepping stone role for the enterprise architect role?
Okay, I'm going to answer this, VJ, but VJ, truthfully, you're thinking about it all wrong. I want you to think about it correctly. The only thing that prepares you for a role is training for the role. So if I want to be a doctor, being a nurse is not going to prepare me to be a doctor. It's going to prepare me to be a nurse. If I want to be an airplane pilot, being a flight attendant is not going to prepare me there. So the way you become an enterprise architect is you train for it. So here's an example. Wallace Agana was a student of ours. You can see a video of him on our YouTube channel. He was a sales rep. That was his last job. We trained him, and his next job was an enterprise architect at JP Morgan Chase Bank. At the same time, we had Angelo Munoz, who had all kinds of a background, and after we trained him, he's working as an enterprise architect. Pritapal Sejan was a software developer for 20 years. We retrained him and got him an enterprise architect job. But then Jermaine Houston never worked in tech, and we got him his first enterprise architect job. So you are the accumulation of the training you got. So could a product manager be very helpful? Yeah, it could. Could a sales rep be very helpful? Yeah, it could. But it's going to be more about your training than the job you used to have. What you ate for dinner yesterday does not determine if you're going to be obese for the rest of your life. In fact, 3 days ago, I went with my wife and I actually had 2 cheeseburgers and I put them on these whole grain buns and broccoli instead of French fries. For me, that's a bad meal. But I woke up the next day. I did 2 hours of yoga. I felt good, and I've eaten my chicken and broccoli ever since, and I feel good. So is it a stepping stone role? Sure. But the only role that prepares you for the role is the actually training for the role that you actually have. And that's really the secret. It's your preparation, it's your knowledge, it's your capability.
Yeah, we work with a lot of students and help them understand that it doesn't matter what position or role you come from and what your background is, if it's technical or non-technical, there's always going to be transferable skill sets that you can take with a job. So for example, if you look at it like a product manager, they're going to focus on the vision of that product and a roadmap for that product. And then that's going to get disseminated down to the sales agent, the account executives, to the sales engineers, the solution engineers, so that they can do their job in being able to tailor particular feature sets to what the customer wants. But the product manager is also going to do market research. They're going to try to find out what are the pain points of their potential customers and what can they do on hitting those pain points, either with different products, feature sets on those products, and how is that going to be in regards to a return on investment? So if I'm putting all that money in on the research and development of a product, is that going to be worthwhile from a business perspective to actually go on and actually integrate into a product set? So you can take something as simple as this idea that you have to do market research and understand what problems your customers are facing and what solutions they're looking for, and transfer that skill set towards an architecture role. Because part of an architect is to actually discover what is the problem that the customer has.
Yes.
And how can I take this product now and align technology to that business need so that I can build the holistic strategy around it. So it's not a stepping stone per se, but you can always take something from a skill set and transfer it to another role.
And that's what the secret, Mark, is. Take what you can from your past role and then learn what you need for the future one.
Right. And the next question is from Briyesh. It says, many times senior leadership and architecture team is expecting architects to perform proof of concepts as well as without providing additional technical resource. How is an architect, let me rephrase that, how architect is expected to handle this?
Okay, I'm going to answer this fairly simply. You know, I've never done a hands-on proof of concept in 25 years as an architect. And when I was at Cisco, one of the more junior level architects said, Mike, I have to do this myself. And I said, no, you don't. And he was doing it himself. And then I said, okay. I said, here, watch what I did. So the next time I had a proof of concept to do, the first thing I did is I quantified the opportunity of the architecture. And let was say $80 million. And then I went to senior management and I showed them, I said, I'm working on an $80 million opportunity to increase our effectiveness and likelihood of closing this architecture. I need to have these people that are going to do a beautiful job on the proof of concept. Would you give me the resources? And I had 16 people in less than one day. So if you have the business acumen to go to senior leadership and you have the ability to quantify the product and you have the ability to exercise influence and you have the ability to sell, you will never be doing a proof of concept by yourself. And this is the reason why I said you must have so much executive presence. You must have so much leadership skills. You must have so much sales skills. You must have that ability to exercise influence, that emotional intelligence, because if not, you'll do it on your own. So that's really the secret. Focus on all those business skills. And when you prove it to senior management that, look, I can do this thing by myself, but we might lose $200 million, or I can bring these people and I can get it with an 80% success. How many people do you need, Mike? So that's really the key. That's why I've never in 25 years ever had to do a proof of concept. I have met people that I worked with that were great technical architects. I mean, they were really strong with the technology, but they lacked the business acumen, and they were doing hands-on stuff every single day of the week. And then some of them took training and exercising influence. Some of them went into business school. Some of them took sales training. And the next thing you realize, they never touched the technology again. That's the way.
And Priyesh, what you're really describing are the troubles generally that a sales or solution engineer faces.
Yeah.
Where they're put on the spot by the account executive and they have no additional resources to actually perform the proof of concept, or you may hear the term proof of value. Either way, it's the same thing.
Yeah. Same thing.
Now, if you find yourself in that situation, and then I'll pivot back to the actual architecture and the role, how we defined it is, but if you find yourself in this role where you're being put on the spot without the additional technical resources to perform that part of the sales cycle, what you need to work on is building rapport with your support team and your support engineers. Because the better you can build rapport with them, the more eager they will be to help you out in these instances. Because the reality is, depending on the swath of products that you're going to be responsible with, or to basically demonstrate to the customer, you're going to go a mile wide and inch deep. So you will need somebody that actually goes an inch wide, but a mile deep. And that is where either it's going to be the engineers that are going to help you, or depending on how large your company is, if you think about something like an IBM, for example, they will have particular, and they'll give them titles like architect, but it's just the depth of understanding of the inner workings of the technology that they have. But you'll have them because they'll be specialized in a particular solution or that product. And they can really get nitty gritty detail on demonstrating how that particular product is going to solve a pain point. Okay. So with that out of the way, when you think about actual architecture, as Mike said, you're not actually touching the technology. Meaning you're not there to do the presenting of the solution. You are going to have to, though, let's say, if you don't have a team already set together that can actually do the demonstration, such as the sales engineer or just engineers, you will have to have the ability to go to the managers of that particular team and be able to sell them on giving you the resource to perform that particular task. But at no way or shape or form, as Mike said, are you sitting there and you're actually demonstrating the product or the solution to the stakeholders. Your responsibility is going to be on helping them understand how the solution aligns to the business needs and how this is going to be efficient both from a business strategy standpoint and, of course, from a financial standpoint as well. The next question is from Freedom Lands. How do I get past the roadblock of a minimum of 8 to 10 years of experience in cloud architecture?
Freedom Lance, I have no idea what you're actually talking about. Debbie Gribben's first tech job after our training was an architect at Credera in England. Pierre Dassault worked on sailboats as his last job, and his first job was at LeaseWeb as a solution architect. Al Legister was a sales rep for Kimberly Clark, the consumer products group, and after our training, he got hired as a senior architect at Deloitte. Wallace Agana was a sales rep. Noah Parker was a social worker who was hired by a head after our training. Deep Penn was actually working at Best Buy, but we did ultimately get him a security architect job. Vladimir, he had a Russian last name or Ukrainian last name, I can't remember it. But he was a 24-year-old college student who was hired by North Highland by the time we were done. Jermaine was selling landscaping gear, for example. Who's another one that I can think of? Jordan Kitko, hired by AWS. Boy, this guy was smart, but he was a college student. Lenny Burnett, who was a video editor, first job as a solutions architect. Jeffrey West was a some kind of cool geospatial GIS. I have no idea what it was, but it wasn't anything related to cloud. And his first job at Calian was a solution architect after our training. Richard Ferrari, or Ferrara, I don't know why I think Ferrari, but he was in the fraud department and a non-tech department at a bank, and he was hired as a solution architect at MUFG directly after our training. So I don't know what you mean. I mean, I was hired as an architect within 3 months of the time that I actually left practicing internal medicine. I don't know what you mean. Now, the job description says this, but on every job description, they want 5 to 10 years. If you want to get a job as a waiter or waitress at the local restaurant, they want 5 years of experience. You want to get a job at a front desk clerk at a hotel, they want 5 or 10 years experience. So clearly it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And to be honest there, we have an entire training program designed around how to address that type of issue. So it would not be fair nor appropriate to go into the depth that is needed to truly give you a roadmap on how to tackle that. But Mike did give you an idea as to how you could tackle that on an interview. And that was simply with, well, what do you need? What do you mean with that? Basically, what you're saying is, how do you denigrate or how do you subjugate my experience level to something as nominal as a number? So what you will have to do is then actually prove your competency. How do you present yourself? What kind of brand are you putting out there? And when I'm talking brand, I'm not talking customer experience. I'm really talking about how do you demonstrate your competency to an employer. So that will be one of those steps that you can do yourself online and also during the job interview. Of course, there's different ways to get around the actual systems, right? They're going to go for keywords and try to find your experience. And that is something where we teach students there's specific ways that you can go about in trying to get to the person that makes the decision. Get to them and circumvent the actual system that's going to filter you out of the process. But definitely one key aspect is going to be demonstrating your competency. All right, next question. All right, follow-up question from Freedom Lands. Does a cloud architect only deal with new cloud architectures? Does a cloud architecture deal with previous cloud architectures that need to be redesigned or upgraded? So greenfield, brownfield.
So yeah, we'll deal with greenfield, which is a brand new architecture. We'll deal with brownfield that's already there. 70% of the time, we're going to deal with architectures that potentially were designed by a vendor and they're an absolute disaster, and we have to refix them, which is pretty normal. A vendor's going to go in there and they're going to sell them the greatest of everything, and then they find out it cost 3 or 4 more times than they thought it did. It didn't perform as well that it was promised, and now you're going in there to go fix it. And that's one of the reasons you need a high level of emotional intelligence in this career. But there's also customers that are basically saying, hey, I'm starting a new business, and they're there. Now, I don't typically work with new businesses unless they're really, really well funded. The new business stuff typically goes to the brand new people, the newbies that really are there. And the reason is, if you work in an AWS or an Azure or a Cisco or an IBM or a Google or a Microsoft or a JP Morgan Chase or a PricewaterhouseCoopers, or they're going to put the people like me and a David Lithicum on the $1 billion projects because we can close that and bring in that $1 billion. And the person that knows the least is going to go work with the small person, because it's like, well, if I lose this $200,000 deal, it's no big deal to me as a company that does $100 billion of revenue a year. It's not that big of a deal. So they're going to put your most senior people on the biggest projects. And that's why I don't think I've done anything less than $1 billion in the last 20 years or so. So there is that. But there's going to be architects that work with startups. That are going to be doing those new things. You're going to have people that are in the data center that are going to go to the cloud. You're going to also, as a cloud architect, have people that went to the cloud and they're like, wait a second, my performance isn't as good, and now I'm paying 3 times the price. Mike, could you bring us back to the data center? But I still want the cloud agility. I still want that function as a service. I still want to auto scale, and I want to scale out. And then they come to me to build them an OpenStack or a Nutanix cloud. So yeah, new, old, and everywhere in between.
There's no absolutes. Let's just put it that way. All right, let's go to the next question.
Sure.
From Earnjoy, what bachelor degree do you recommend for someone who wants to take your course to become an enterprise architect? I am thinking between 2, cloud computing on architecture or entrepreneurship.
Okay, so if I was going to get a degree, the only 2 degrees that I would get in today's world, unless you need to go into law, in which case you need to go to law school, or unless you want to go into medicine or something like that where you need a degree, is a business degree, undergraduate, and an MBA. I don't recommend computer science degrees. They teach old technology that's 20 years old in most cases that players don't even need anymore. They're using other things that are outdated, and they're not going to make anybody see you as an architect. A business degree is incredibly good, because what do we do as architects? We're business consultants, so I would recommend a business degree. Now, you can get hired without a degree. I've got lots of students getting hired without a degree. I'd probably try to train myself to be an architect, and then I would have the company pay for my degree. That's realistically speaking what I would do. And I'll give you an example of it. You know, my first bachelor's degree is actually in nursing. I was a registered nurse for a short period of time. Then I became a nurse practitioner and learned internal medicine. And then I went to Drexel University. I was about 50 to 75% through Drexel University, and I got an incredible job as a network architect. And it honestly paid me double what the MBA graduates at Drexel University were earning in those days. And I was like, well, I can stick this out for the next, and maybe if I'm lucky, I'll get a job that pays me half as much as this, or I can quit my MBA program and take this job and have a life that I've always dreamed about. So I did that. And I got my first architect job, and then I went to Wall Street for a year. I didn't typically talk about that, but I worked on Wall Street for about a year and designed systems for a bank. And then after that, I went to Riverstone and I went to Cisco. When I was at Cisco, they paid for at least 60% of my MBA. They also paid for probably what was at least $100,000 of leadership training and executive training and sales training and emotional intelligence training. So I would train to be an architect and then convince my company to pay for it. In architecture roles, you'll get a lot of financial support, much more than in engineering, because in engineering, you're what's called the cost center. Meaning, if I'm an architect and I design, present, and sell with the sales team a $500 million architecture, I just brought in $500 million to the business. And if they paid me $500,000 and I brought in $500 million, I cost them nothing and I'm a revenue source. By comparison, an engineer, and I love engineers. The engineers are the magical people that make things work. The engineer costs the money. They're not generating revenue. They're delivering the product. And that's why in times when they're tight, they lay off the local engineers and they rehire them in another part of the world where they're cheaper, because it doesn't matter if you're coding in Cameroon, Cayman Islands, Cambodia, Chicago, or California. So kind of think about that in the back of your minds. And yes, I like to alliterate because I love the Cookie Monster. C is for cookies.
Fantastic. All right, let's go on to the next question. That was a very good answer to begin with. From Jimmy, he is asking, I'm new to tech. With remote work and working at a large organization, how do we network with some of these higher up architects if we're just a cloud security analyst?
Well, if you're working at a good company and they have an architecture team, go into the office, go meet them, go talk to them, take them to lunch, have dinner with them. This architect role is a interpersonal one. So if you're not used to it, get some training on how to communicate, how to build relationships. You know, Dale Carnegie had some good documentations on there. Zig Ziglar had some good things. Nicholas Boothman did a nice job of discussing neurolinguistic programming and building relationships. But go out there, pick up your phone. The architect isn't going to be sending a Slack message and getting a Slack message in response. They're like a sales rep. They're going to call someone. Hi, I've noticed that let's say you wanted to do some security things. I've noticed we have a new security product. I'm working on this. Is there a chance we could talk and we could meet up? I have a goal of being an architect one day, just like you. Most people will say yes. And it's funny, Steve Jobs said nearly everybody he's ever asked for a favor did it for him. So go do it. That's what I did. In fact, Jimmy, do you know what I did? And the reason I was a principal architect in less than 2 years when they wanted 15 to 20 years to be a principal architect was this. I got my first job. And I got my first job as a network engineer 4. They had 1 through 4. I never worked in tech. I was a 4. They thought I was good. And on my first day, I said to my manager, I said, any chance I can meet with some of these, your manager and his manager and his manager? I said, I just want to learn how I can be the best employee for this company. I want to get a better understanding of their goals and their needs. And not only can I help you, I can shine. And my manager says, that's smart, Mike. So I started meeting with these executives and I asked the executives, what are your goals? What do you want in the people that are the best? What do you need? Do you recommend, is there anybody that you recommend I could talk to and build a relationship with? So I dialed my phone, I called people, I bought some lunches, I bought some dinners, I bought some drinks, and then I had a relationship. So there's 2 kinds of networks. There's the people that have the LinkedIn network that, social Saturday, and they all make connection requests with people and nobody cares about any of them. That is not a network. The network you have is the people that you can call. And there may only be 10 people that I can call, but I can call 10 people in this world and say, I need a job tomorrow. And they'd find somebody to hire me like that. Or I need to buy a new house. Could you help me? Or whatever it is. That's what you want. That's the network. And how do you do that? How do you build that? One is everything you say you do, you do. When someone needs help, you help them. You are honest, authentic, and truthful in the way you communicate. And you treat others very, very well. And you do that. And you're always reliable. And someone gives you a task to do and you do it and you communicate back that it was done. And if something's taking you longer, call them on the phone and say, I'm a little delayed here. Here's where I'm stuck on. I can deliver it 2 or 3 days later. Could you give me additional resource? What's better for you? You put them in charge. You will build a network of great people. I actually, for our people and our programs, we created this global network of people. And that's one of the reasons our students are so successful is they've got a global network in pretty much every part of the world. And then we've got our alumni. And, I can tell you right now, I've got someone in Deloitte who just told me I was speaking to some of your students the other day. I've got a couple of people at AWS that are talking to some of our students that are there. I've got people in all these companies, and that's the way you do it. You go out there and you build it on the phone. You can send a message on LinkedIn, can we speak, but relationships are built person to person. That's why architects can't be replaced, because it's all person to person. So go out there and build your relationships. Great idea.
And I would like to add this for you, Jimmy. You said you're just a cloud security analyst. From the perspective of the architect and everything that you've heard so far, what you'll notice is that they'll view you as an integral part of the team. Because without you, they also can't complete their own job responsibilities. So they're not going to look down upon you just because you don't have the architect title. So the first thing I would recommend is be confident in who you are, in what you have accomplished. But at the same time, start thinking of ways that perhaps you can do things for that architect. So don't immediately ask for things from them, but see if you can do something that would lighten their load while at the same time allowing you to be able to gain some experience and build that rapport, build that relationship up a little bit more. And of course, this is going to come now after you've taken them out for a cup of coffee or a nice little drink, just to have a conversation, treating them like a human being and not making them feel like they're an interrogation, 101 questions. Okay, so be human, because that's what they're used to. They're used to communicating with humans. So give that a shot. Make sure your confidence is up. Don't think of yourself as lesser, but think of yourself as an integral part of the team. And you'll see that architects are going to be a lot more responsive and actually wanting to help you be able to upskill yourself. It's a very different mentality compared to what you see many times in these operational roles, where it can feel like it's cutthroat, right? If I help you, if I give you some information that I know but you don't know, you might supplant me. Architects don't have that thinking, not at all. So feel free to approach them, but make sure that you give something first instead of just asking from them. And a question from, and I hope if you don't mind if I just say Mac, that might make it a little bit easier for me to pronounce. It says, if you are in your 40s and come from Microsoft MCSE background with cloud in mind, what should be your first certification or route to get there? And is there a follow-up to that question, a part two, by any chance? Okay, if not, then I guess we'll try to focus on the idea, how do you transition towards cloud architecture?
So the key is you're going to have to be trained for cloud architecture. You know, the MCSE is just a certification. I did that certification back in 1996 or something like 1998 with NT 4.0. It was a systems administration. How do you configure a Windows system? How do you add a user? What do you do with your domain controller? How do you set up the network settings? Hands-on, how to. They called it a Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer, but there was no engineering in there. It was all systems administration, all technician work. So how do you get a job if you're in your 40s? How do you get a job if you're in 30s? How do you get a job if you're like Robert Welch, who was a student of ours, who was 61 years old, or Sig Wolf, who was a student of ours that was 63 years old when we got him hired? You go out there and you get the right training. How do you become a pilot? You go to flight school. How do you become a lawyer? You go to law school. How do you become a physician? You go to medical school. So this is really what we're actually talking about. So go out there and get the business skills, get the leadership skills, get the sales skills, get the executive presence, get the presentation skills, learn the underlying network, data center, cloud technology, and security technology. Learn how to put the pieces together and design these systems in a cohesive strategy to improve your client's business performance. And poof, you'll be working as an architect. I can interview 1,000 people that are certified and they don't know architecture. So there's not a single well, it's not true. There's only one certification out there that actually has any architecture in it. And this certification will cost you $30,000 to $50,000, and it will take you 2 to 4 years. It is the Cisco Certified Design Expert. It is the only architecture certification in the entire world. The Microsoft, the Azure Solution Architect Expert is a systems administration certification. The Google Professional Cloud Architect is a systems administrator certification. The AWS Solutions Architect Professional has nothing to do with architecture. It's all about systems administration. Why don't you join us from our webinars and download the free book on how to become an architect? But we've got an architecture training program, and we've got graduates working at Apple and Amazon and Cisco and Google and IBM and Microsoft, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, Zscaler, LeaseWeb, CDW, MUFG Bank. I mean, you name it. If there's a prestigious organization, our graduates are working there. Kalient. But that's what you need to do. You need to be taught architecture. You know, there's some things you can figure out on your own. Look, you can buy a book on learning how to write Python, which is not an architect skill, but you can figure it out. You can buy 2 Cisco routers and go through a Cisco configuration guide and learn how to type config T in gigabit Ethernet 0/0 IP address, no shut. Router OSPF1, put a network statement in that. You can learn how to do that. That's how to. But you know what you can't learn out of a book like that is how do you design the network for an enterprise that's got 6,000 remote locations and 250,000 employees and that need an address planning and a routing plan. So you have to get training for it. The first thing I would do is I would get training. And here's why I would get training before I would think about a certification. Delroy Back got his first cloud security architect job without a single certification after we trained him. Robert Welch had one cloud certification when he got hired as a solution architect, or I'm sorry, a cloud security architect, the cloud practitioner. Jeffrey West had a cloud practitioner before Kalient hired him after our training. But you can have all 10 AWS certifications, and I'm not going to hire you as an architect if you can't give a presentation, you can't design, and you can't lead. So it's not about certifications, it's about skills. Here's what certifications do, and they're very effective at it. The certification will help you get an interview, but it won't help you go from interview to hire. Learn the skills and you'll get hired. Now, which certifications do I say for a cloud architect? 3 of them I actually recommend. I recommend either the Azure Solutions Architect Expert or the AWS Solutions Architect Professional. It has nothing to do with architecture, but it'll get you an interview, which is why I like it. The next certification I recommend is TOGAF 10. And of course, I teach these certifications to our students. Why TOGAF 10? It's an architecture framework that says, hey, everybody, start at the business vision, then go to the business processes, then go to the data architecture, then the tech. Think about opportunities and solutions. Think about governance structures. Think about change management. And it keeps people from thinking or trying to go down the engineering path. And if it's security, I recommend the CISSP as a backup certification. If it's cloud network architecture, I recommend the CCNP, for example. Because there are no architecture certifications except for the CCDE. And Mark can tell you that anybody that does a CCDE is going to spend $20,000 to $40,000 and 2 to 4 years, just like a CCIE. And, that's what it is. And here's the reality. You'll have that certification. And still, if you don't have the presentation skills, the sales skills, the executive presence, the leadership, they're still not going to hire you. But you can go out there and get trained to be an architect, become a great architect. You can take these exams and they'll be silly easy to you when you understand the underlying technology. Whereas if you don't understand the underlying technology and you just took a course, it'll be very challenging. So learn the stuff first, then the exams are going to be nothing for you. That's what I would do.
And I want to make it clear for everyone. You already took the first step by being here today.
Yep.
Because there was something that you required clarity on. And to be able to understand what direction one is to head into, they require clarity and then eventually some guidance. What I would recommend, since it costs you absolutely nothing except a little time reading it, if you look at the description box below this video, you'll actually see that, and I believe it's going to be the first one, if I'm correct, it says, learn how to become a cloud architect. There's an ebook that you can pick up that's going to give you a description of what that role entails and what skill set are required to be able to become a cloud architect. Or in a matter of fact, you can send me almost any type of architect. And the reason I recommend that first is you use this word mind. And we generally always talk with the students and various other interested parties in regards to shifting someone's mindset. Now, you come from a what seems to be an operational background, engineering background with your MCSE. So the first step also would be to change your mindset. Leave behind the hands-on activities and focus more on the conceptual, theoretical aspects of the job and of the technology. But definitely download that ebook first. And then once you have gone through it, employ some critical thinking, try to figure out what questions would you else have, right? Go through the process of trying to understand what problem do I have that I want to solve. Write down those questions and then either join us on our next Q&A to ask a question, or even better, once we have our webinar on Zoom in regards to how to get your first cloud architect job, come off mute and have a conversation with us, have a discussion. That's what you're going to be doing as an architect anyway. Have conversations with people and then ask your questions so that you can gain further clarity.
And Chris, in case somebody looks in the chat box and then drops off and doesn't hear something, please go to UW, because that's a very dangerous question that I want to answer correctly. And then we'll go back to the other ones. It's as somebody who recently transitioned into tech question.
All right, from UW, as someone who recently transitions into tech, if the cloud architect role is not a technical role, why then do I have to struggle to learn Linux and networking? These are the two aspects I'm struggling with.
Okay, so UW, the first I'm going to say, I never said it wasn't technical. I said it's not hands-on. I said there's no coding, there's no configuring. And that's the thing. Why are you learning Linux if you want to be a cloud architect? There's no reason for you to learn Linux whatsoever. It is not part of our job. It is part of a cloud engineering's job. Why do you need to know networking? Now, there we're going to talk about. You need to understand networking, not how to configure a router, not how to click boxes, but you need to understand networking because the network is the foundation. So when it comes to networking, how do you get your people to connect to the cloud from their campus? What type of wide area technology should you use? Should you use a private line? Should you use an IPsec tunnel? Should you use a software-defined WAN? Should you use a SASE WAN? Now, when you're getting a private line and you have to understand VLANs, you're going to have to understand what is a VLAN tag, what is a VLAN trunk, and why are you using them. The IP addressing plan that you actually have for the organization will determine how the routes and traffic flows through your system. Get that right, your architecture will work and it'll have high performance and high availability. Get it wrong and your architecture will crash and fall apart and there'll be outages every day. Why do you need to know a routing protocol like BGP? Because if your traffic can't go from point A to point B if it doesn't know how to get there. So while you're not going to go to a router and configure BGP, you do need to understand the BGP finite state machine, how BGP makes its forwarding decision, how BGP selects a path. For example, prefer the path with the largest weight, then prefer the path with the largest local preference, etc. Because you're going to want to maybe have two links to the cloud provider and load share. So networking you need to understand, but it's not the how to networking. It's the how does the technology work. So how does PGP work? How do you performance tune BGP? How do you optimize it? It's in here. It's not in here. So there are technical skills. In fact, when we did our discussion initially, and you go watch it, we did talk about all those networking things, but you don't need to know Linux. You don't need to know Python. You don't need to know Terraform. You don't need to know Bash scripting, Windows PowerShell scripting, because that's hands-on. We are still very technical. We still need to understand a lot of the underlying technology, but it's the same way the doctor needs to understand how your heart works and how your blood vessels works. But when the nurse is at the hospital carrying out the plan and starting the IV and giving the drugs, the doctor's not doing it. They're building the plan. You have to understand the technology to build the plan. But, what are you going to do on Linux? That's not anything we actually have to do with. That's hands-on.
It sounds like UW, you've been a unfortunate victim of the Internet of Things brainwashing. Mm-hmm. That's why we suggest everybody be careful when you read job descriptions, so that you can understand in regards to what are they truly hiring for, because there's many misconceptions to what the architect actually does compared to the type of mishmash that they're trying to warp you into. Okay, but definitely keep this in mind. An architect focuses on the business needs.
Yeah.
If you are to have a focal point of business needs, it's going to become logically very difficult to focus on the details of different types of technologies. But if, let's say, the role actually mentions that they want you to have a fundamental understanding of how an operating system works, and then they list Linux, Windows, you may have to understand what user space is. You'll have to understand what kernel space is. How do drivers factor into the actual operation of this operating system when talking to different applications? And when it comes to networking, Mike made an example of BGP. For example, you don't necessarily have to understand all the little nerd knobs or the configurations on how to get the protocol up and running. But perhaps you will need the understanding of how to take a business driver and translate into something that BGP can influence via a policy change. It could be something as very simple as if I'm paying more for one link to a service provider compared to the other link, how can we utilize the technology, the protocol of BGP, and actually making sure that the technology we have available is going to work with the business driver that we have.
Exactly.
And then once you can identify that, think back from a strategic standpoint, how you're going to outline how to do that bridging of the tech and the business. Then you're going to take the business requirements, put them into a lower format, the technical requirements, which eventually going to get shuffled off to the engineer that is specifically trained to be capable of implementing the change that the business requires. All right, next question from Lukao. Hi, Mike. Once again, congratulations for the masterclass. Does an architect also need some project management skills? And what do you think about the solution architect role?
Okay, so Luca, thank you so much. First, an architect does need project management skills, because if we're going to build a team of 15 to 50 people, we're going to have to know who's doing what. Now, Luca, let's be fair. If it's a big architecture that I'm working on, I'm going to bring in a project manager. In fact, every time I have an RFP to do for a big customer, I bring in a project manager, because if I'm going to have a team of 15 to 50 people and they're all writing documents, somebody needs to keep track of this. And here's why it can't be me. See, a project manager is going to go to Mark and say, Mark, is it done? Mark, do you have this document for me? Mark, do you have this document for me? Mark, I need it by tomorrow, 2 p.m. What's your status? That's what the project manager needs to do, to keep track, to make sure everything gets done on time. I'm the architect. I need to be soft and cuddly. Mark, how you doing? What's going on? Mark, could you look into this for me? So if I'm the taskmaster, like the project manager typically is, I'm not going to be that soft, cuddly executive. It's the same reason why a doctor in a medical office never collects money from you, because you can't be the trusted advisor and then take somebody's money in the same visit. So do you need project management skills? Yes, but you need much more executive skills, much more leadership skills, much more bring out the best in other skills. And generally speaking, I bring a project manager with me because they can do that. But if you're a brand new architect and you're working on something small, and you've got 3 architects that you're working with, because it's only like a $5 million architecture, yeah, you're going to need some project management skills. So let's talk about the solution architect role. I try to tell people that this is not the role to train for. I train people. So what is a solution architect? A solution architect, for the most part, is somebody who works for a vendor and designs, presents, and sells that vendor stuff. So if you work at Cisco, you design, present, and sell Cisco stuff. You're a solution architect. If you work at Microsoft, you design, present, and sell Microsoft stuff. You're a solution architect. If you work at AWS, here, let me give you my AWS fancy stuff. Design, present, and sell. It's AWS. Now, all of these companies also have architects that get paid much, much, much more, like the enterprise architect or the business architect. So I train my students to be more platform architects, like a cloud architect. And many of them take junior level, take the role as a solution architect, which is the most junior level of all architect roles. So if you train to be a cloud architect, you can, like I train our people, you can take a cloud architect role or a solution architect role, because you understand that end-to-end multi-cloud, multi-vendor, which makes you worth potentially 100,000 more than just a solution architect. I have students that don't want to finish the program and they get 3/4 of the way through the program and they go on a solution architect interview and they get hired. So they take that. So I have no problem with the solution architect. I was a solution architect 25 years ago. My pay tripled when I got out of the solution architect role. The amount of respect people gave me tripled when I got out of the solution architect role. The life that I had was much better when I got out of the solution architect role. So it's there. But I have no problem with the solution architect role. I train a tremendous number of solution architects and they love it. So it's great. The solution architect role is great. But I would prepare for a bigger role, because why wouldn't you get your training to do the best job you possibly can? It takes me just as much time to train a solution architect as it does a cloud architect. Because if I'm going to train a solution architect and they're not quite, they're not touching the tech. They're not an engineer, but they're more techie like an engineer. It'll take just as long to train a solution architect as it was an enterprise architect. But the potential earnings of the enterprise architect, which can be a chief architect, dwarf the solution architect by so much. So I say aim big. You can always take a job that pays less. That's an entry-level job. But why would you start with the bottom when you could start at a bigger role and take the bottom as your intro-level role, but be trained to do things that are much bigger, that pay much more, that are going to give you more respect, and what's going to give you a better career path? You're the enterprise architect, and all day, every single day, you're talking with the chief information officer and the C-suite. Next job is a chief information officer. You're a multi-cloud architect, and you're working with the enterprise architect and the CIO every single day of the week. What's your next job? The chief technology officer, the enterprise architect. You start at the solution architect, you got to work your way up. See, there's no such thing as an entry-level job. No such thing. A doctor's first job is a physician. And if that physician makes bad decisions, people die. Do you know what a lawyer's first job is? And if the lawyer makes a bad decision, billions of dollars could be lost. People could go to jail. I don't know. It's a lawyer. An airplane pilot's first job is flying an airplane. So it's not that there's an entry-level job. It's what your skills are. That's when it comes down to at the end of the day. What can you actually do? So For me, I train for good skills. I've never had an entry-level job. I did have a senior engineer job for 3 months in tech, and then within 3 months, I was the lead architect, and then 6 months later, I was a senior architect, and a year later, I was a principal architect, and then I was back to a basic solution architect because I was traveling too much, and I took a job in New York because I didn't have to travel so much. And then poof, I went into an enterprise architect and a business architect. I would never look back. I love them all. Every role is great, but I think it's the bottom in terms of pay and respect. There's nothing wrong with it if you love it. It's more technical if you love it. But I want you to have the best career ever. I'd rather get you on a path closer to the C-suite. So, but that's just me. But they're all good. Every one of these roles is good. The real question, Luca, is what's going to make you happy? And that's it.
I am so tempted. You know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm going to add my 2 cents to this one. If you're an engineer, meaning you have a strong technical background, and you've now come across our training, you're excited about it, you have a goal in mind, and you're going to get trained specifically to shoot your shot and go for more the business side of the architecture role, which we focus on in our training. But you do have the possibility now to go into a solution architecture role or solution engineer or sales engineer. They're all kind of like the same. I think it might do you some good, especially if you've had no exposure towards the sales side and the product side of that business. Because many times as engineers, what will happen is you're going to be so stuck on a particular product or maybe supporting multiple products, and you're basically sitting there on the troubleshooting end, on the support end, and maybe sometimes some type of information, maybe you're doing some turnups. That role will do you very good because it's going to help you to slowly transition your mindset. And since you're now having tailored training towards a higher executive role, which is the actual architect role that we're discussing, but at the same time, you're having some additional practical application where now you can take the training and actually apply it, I think will help you boost your growth. And I'm going to put another financial aspect of it. It pays a lot better than an engineering role. So why wouldn't you take it? Make some extra money, gain some extra experience, be able to practically apply the skill set that you're learning in the training. And maybe within 6 months to 8 months, guess what? Go for your dream to be that business side architect that you can be. And that would be my suggestion with everything that Mike said. All right, next question, please. From Lukao, it is possible to be a solution architect without being linked to a cloud provider.
Absolutely, Luca. You could be working at a software company and you're going to be a solution architect designing, presenting, and selling the software. You could be at a networking company and design, present, and sell a networking thing. All a solution architect does is someone that's basically focused on designing, presenting, and selling one vendor's equipment. So there's that. Now, you could go to a paint store. I'm sorry, the old cell phone companies used to have solution architects, which would sell you your cell phone plan. So solution architect is not the biggest term, but solution architect is based upon the industry. A solution architect at Cisco could be, designing, presenting, and selling Cisco routing type solutions. Of course, they could have a solution architect in the voice department that designs, presents, and sells IP voice solutions. So yeah, you can definitely, lots of solution architect roles that have nothing to do with cloud computing.
Yep. Good follow-up question, Luca. The next question, please. So we can make sure we're actually getting to your questions. I don't want to have you guys be left out. All right, next question is from Freedom Lands. I have a friend who has been a solution architect for AWS for at least 5 years. The information you teach in your program is above his knowledge base as a solution architect. How should I practice information hygiene with this friend?
Okay, Freedom Lands, that's a good question. I actually know some solutions architects that are actually working at AWS that are still attending our classes so they can continue to learn more. But, if the person's a solution architect with AWS and they're not in an associate architect role, or they're not like an architect 1 or an architect 2, and they're either they're maybe a principal architect or a distinguished architect, listen to them. And here's the key. If you speak to me, you get the perspective of the MBA executive infrastructure person. If you speak to David Lithicum, who I have the deepest respect for, he's also part of our company and also trains some of our students. He comes at it from more that application architecture and executive perspective. If there's another good architect that you speak to, they may have their own strengths. So the key is listen to people working in the roles and, get several perspectives, which is good. But I kind of weigh the perspectives when I speak to people. And here's what I mean by weigh them. If someone like a Russ White that I knew from the distinguished architecture team at Cisco tells me this is the way this is going to work, and I know that person is the top 0.1% of all network architects, tell me what I need to know. Now, I will verify it like I verify everything, but I'm going to truly trust it. If it's a person that just got hired as an SE1 or a sales engineer 1 at Cisco, I'm going to assume that they're still learning. They don't know what they don't know yet. And by the time that person's an SE3 at Cisco, now they're going to be rock stars. So the key is, it doesn't mean they're not smart, even if they're brand new. And it doesn't mean they don't know a lot because they're brand new. So I still listen to people that are actually in the job that I want, but I listen to more of the people that are successful. Because if somebody's been in a junior level architect role for 5 years and they're not moving up, they're not doing a good job, or they'd be promoted and they wouldn't be in that same role. So information hygiene to me is, if I see someone's had 5 different jobs in 5 years, chances are I don't want to listen to them. If I see an architect that worked at Amazon and they were hired as a solution architect, and a year later they were senior solutions architect, and 3 years later they're a principal architect, well, that person I'm going to listen to because they're doing something right. But if I had someone that was a solution architect for 9 months at Accenture, and then for 8 months at Deloitte, and then for 6 months at Microsoft, and 6 months at Google, and they want to say ex Microsoft, ex Google, well, why didn't they get promoted? What's really going on? So that's part of what I do. So it goes down to anything. You really want to look at all factors. You got to look at things holistically. And that's to see if architecture, it's everything and what goes into it. So I kind of hope that makes sense. That's a great question, Freedom Lens.
Very good. Let us move on to the next question, please. This is from Anna. What will take me to be a customer success account manager with Microsoft? Does it entail mastering all Microsoft services?
Okay, Anna, great question. So most customer success managers would have no idea how the majority of Microsoft services work. So what's a customer success manager? A customer success manager is a somewhat of an executive that deals with clients that have had problems as a general rule. So company is a big client of Microsoft. They just had a major outage. They're having problems with a various piece of technology. And the customer success manager is a person with lots of emotional intelligence to try and diffuse situations with the client, lots of leadership skills because they're going to go in there and they're going to bring in a lot of people from all backgrounds to come fix it up. Strong relationships with the sales reps and the account teams that are over there, the ability to drive critical incident resolutions from the technical support centers, the ability to schmooze, the ability to go to the client site and take them out to dinner and listen to their pain points. I've done customer success work. I actually love it. But what it's really about is building a relationship with the client, making sure that client's successful. So when somebody buys a $500 million of your stuff and they're getting nothing out of it, they're getting pretty angry, and they're getting pretty angry pretty quickly. And then that sales rep wants to sell them some new service because that's what they're paid to do. And the customer is saying, I'm not buying any of your stuff until you fix it. That's when the customer success account manager comes in there and if they start escalating problems. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Mark, you're muted.
Wrong button I pressed there. I had to look down on my keyboard. I was going to tell you, Anna, you are going to be the bridge between the customer and the internal team. And part of the internal team could be product manager, could be a solution architect, could be a solution engineer, sales engineer, could be engineers. But I want you to think of it from this way. If one of your responsibilities is to maintain or grow a relationship with a customer, and let's say that customer does have issues with products that the company that you work for sells, would it not be logical and sensible that perhaps you will have to have an understanding at least of what products are sold
Yeah, that
and
go
under what domain they're going to be sold,
and
right?
what they're used
You want to
for.
be able to know the difference between what Microsoft Teams does and what it is used for, right? For this unified communication aspect, and what Microsoft Active Directory is for. You do not need to understand the details because that is not your job. As a matter of fact, I would bet that if they saw, any of your superiors saw you actually getting that technical, they're going to think you applied for the wrong role. You're working in the
Exactly.
wrong role. So your responsibility is the interpersonal skills. Work on building rapport, maintaining a customer, doing the schmoozing, as Mike always likes to say, and that's what's going to be. Lean on the people that have spent their time, their money, blood, sweat, and tears learning the tech, and have them support you and enable them to be successful. Because if you can do that, they're going to make you successful as well.
Yeah. And if you had too technical of a profile, and I've had to do this with people, someone's an engineer and now they want to be a customer success executive. Now it's about rebranding that person and making them look more businessy and changing the way they walk, the way they speak, the way they talk, the way they present, the way they lead, getting people to forget they know so much about the technology so they see them more as an executive. It's kind of like a movie. You look at Arnold Schwarzenegger, you think, or Sylvester Stallone, you used to think action star. They don't do a lot of love stories because they get typecast in it. So the career you build, the message you build, the clothes you wear, what you say, how you walk and talk determines how people perceive you.
Correct. Let us move on to the next question, please. And that is from Benjamin. When you say you're farther away from the technology, what does that mean from a day-to-day perspective? And how do you stay informed about the ins and the outs of each moving part without hands-on time?
Okay, so there's a couple things that we need to talk about. What is the day-to-day like of an enterprise architect in a big company? Well, it involves a meeting or two or three, so lots of meetings. You typically will take some people out to lunch. Maybe you'll take them out for cocktails. Then you will give a presentation. You'll be writing some document. It's it. It's going to be documents. It's going to be meetings. It's going to be leading teams. It's going to be schmoozing. That's what you do as an architect. So how do you stay informed about the ins and outs of each moving part? You don't. It was David Lithicum that said it best. He said, if I knew someone that could tell me the difference between the AWS APIs and the Azure APIs, I would not hire them as an architect. I might consider hiring them as an engineer. So it's not about being ins and out, knowing the ins and outs. And here's the reason why. I am a network architect with 25 years of experience, and I know networking real well. But I'm the chief architect for Go Cloud Careers. Now, when I need networking, I ask Mark to take care of it. Why? Because I got to focus on, what's going on sales strategy wise and marketing strategy wise and how the students are doing and teaching my students. I can no longer focus on that. So when you're an architect, the whole point of building the team is you can't afford to dive too deep. And most people don't understand why you can't dive too deep, but I'm actually going to show you two photos, which is going to explain it. And I may have shown these photos before. I like to use these photos as an example, but let's say you're focused on the network right now. And the network is basically one component of your entire network. Please, Chris, show this. So let's say, for an example, the network is the squirrel that's in front of you. I am exclusively focused on what's in front of me. I am the network architect. I'm looking at my BGP, my OSPF. I'm looking at my MPLS traffic engineering tunnels, my IP address planning, all that stuff. Look what you see in front of me, directly what's in front of you, and you miss the big picture. So here's what was really going on in this big picture, and this is why you can never get that down and dirty as an architect. Here's what was really going on. Chris, please share this image for me. What was going on when I zoomed in to see that squirrel was just like looking at the network. What you missed was the big picture of this scary cat named Cindy. She's my cat. She's like the ultimate warrior. And my cat was figuring out how to get that squirrel and how to catch it. Now, admittedly, I actually picked up Cindy, carried her in the house because I didn't want her to kill the squirrel, which she would have. But the second you focus on anything too deep, what ultimately happens is you end up missing the big picture, and then big problems occur. Now, How do you stay technical? Now, I can promise you, if you configure things all day long, you will still not learn how they work. I've interviewed thousands of hands-on people, and I asked them how the technology works. So they won't know. You give me someone that just passed a Cisco certified network professional certification, and they've done 150 hands-on configuration labs, and then I ask them to explain BGP communities to me and explain how I would traffic engineer with BGP and ask them how to not become a transit autonomous system and ask them how I would create a policy to load share across my 8 internet service providers without getting out of order packets. And I promise you, they won't know how to answer it because that's engineering, not architecture. Now, Benjamin, I'm also going to give some other important advice. What if I told you that there's been barely no changes in technology for the last 25 years? Okay, do you know when the virtualization was invented, which is the basis of cloud computing? IBM was actually virtualizing mainframes in the 1970s. Do you know when NoSQL databases were created? The 1970s. Relational databases were, 30, 40 years old as well. Do you know when the first virtual machine, which is the basis of an EC2 instance, an AWS, a compute engine instance, was made by VMware in 1999? Now, do you know when private lines were available? 50, 60 years ago, those direct connections. You know when VLANs were done? 30, 40 years ago. Here's a new press release out of AWS. We allow IPsec over a direct connection. Cisco did it in 1998. AWS has VPC flow logs. Cisco had NetFlow back in 1995. All this new technology that we have is identical versions of the same old technology that we have. First AI systems I worked on were in 2001. We had a bank that we had the mathematicians of the bank write an algorithm that would look at news stories and determine when to buy and sell a stock. Now it's generative AI. David Lithicum, who's part of our team, had an AI architecture in 1980s that landed him a job in AI at NASA in the 1990s. So most of what we have is a new version of the old thing. So instead of focusing on your hands-on how-to, I want you to really understand the underlying technology, because the BGP that I learned 30 years ago is the same BGP today. The IP addressing, subnetting, and supernetting is the same. The first cloud I worked on was in 1993. It was an ISDN cloud. So everything you see is faster than it used to be, which gives us more capabilities, which means we can use them to solve different business problems. But the tech doesn't change. And if your fundamentals are strong, I mean really strong, you would have said, wow, private VLANs where two hosts in the same VLANs can't talk to each other. Wait, Kubernetes is out there years later. Two containers in the same operating system can't talk to each other. It's all the same version of the old thing. So master your fundamentals. And that's why I spend 900 hours training our architects to make sure their fundamentals are good. And then with every new technology, I get it. I know how it works. Been there, done that, move on. But you're not going to ever be able to stay as technical as you can. And the higher you get up in your architecture roles, the more pencil pushing skills you have, the more leadership skills you have. And that becomes your new set of skills. How do I move this business? How do I increase revenue? How do I improve operational efficiency? How do I solve business problems? And that is really the main job.
Yep. I hope that answers your question. Let's go on to the next question, please. And this is from Goldani 1991. How to implement a advisor model for small companies in terms of general architecture, enterprise, and solutions. What would you do if you are a junior solution architect, and how should I bill?
Okay, so there is no such thing as a junior anything. You either can do the job or you can't. So if I was starting an architecture practice, the first thing that I would do is I would hire an enterprise architect that could actually do enterprise architecture. I would hire some senior architects with me. I would hire some MBAs in the leadership and strategic divisions. And I would not try to provide architecture consulting skills. And here's why. If I wanted to start an architecture consulting firm, I've spent 25 years. I got a Rolodex. I can pick up my phone and call any chief information officer at any major company and say, it's Mike Gibbs. I'm looking for what to do. Now, if you don't have that Rolodex, what are you going to need? You're going to need to spend a few $1 million to create a market. That means a marketing campaign. That means creation of the right kind of things that are going to look classy. Because if you're going to advise business, you better look like you know how to advise business. And that means you're going to need sales reps to go sell it. You're going to need enterprise architects that can do it. If you don't have, the MBAs or the MBA equivalent knowledge where you can analyze an organization, analyze its business processes, analyze its financial statements, balance sheets, its cash flows, that kind of thing, everything you do is going to hurt your client. So I would actually make sure that I was capable of being an architect. I would work at an architect at a strategy consulting company for 3 to 5 years. I would build up my contact list, and then I wouldn't be a junior architect. I'd be in a position where I can actually help people, and I would do it. That's why I don't go to a health coach for medical advice. I go to a physician or a nurse practitioner, and that's the reason why.
All right. Next question is from Tom Woe. Is it possible to become a cloud architect without prior experience in IT?
Tamwa, we have people working at every major company that are cloud architects. You were actually here when I actually gave a list of 15 of about 30 or 40 people we have. You can watch a tremendous number of people, but I'll go through a couple. Just Arun, for example, was working at Home Depot before we got him his first job at TELUS. I mentioned Ivan Tambo was a waiter hired by AWS. I mentioned that Richard Ferrari. I didn't mention Amaranth, who got hired by Bell Media when we were done. I mentioned Jeffrey West, who was hired. Ria was hired by NetWest. I don't think she had a tech background before. I had mentioned Lenny Burnett. I don't think was hired. He was our video editor. I don't think I mentioned him before, but he got hired by Arrow Electronics. I'm pretty sure Ranchera had no background before AWS hired him other than our training. I mentioned Jordan Kitco, never worked in tech before AWS hired him. Daniel Bosu was 20 years old when JP Morgan Chase hired him after our training. Balwinder was a stay-at-home mom. Jennifer Emo was a Microsoft. Noah Parker was a social worker before he got hired. Vladimir was a 24-year-old college student. Al Legister got his first job as a senior solution architect job out with a sales rep. And I can give you example after example. Delroy Batt was working on ambulances. So yeah, you can with the right training.
And by the way, just quickly, make sure you check out the free resources in the description box, because they will even give you more depth in regards to the particular question you've had. Now, to walking edits, the question is, would it ever be possible to become a security or solutions architect before the age of 20? I'm currently a cloud security engineer and have been so for about 1 year now.
So walking edits is going to depend upon how you carry yourself. Daniel Bosu, you can see a video of him on our YouTube channel, carried himself very well. And on his 20th birthday, he got hired as a solutions architect at JP Morgan Chase Bank. So the answer is yes. Delroy Batt was early 20s when he got hired. But the key is you're going to have to really show your energy, your enthusiasm, your passion for the work. You're going to have to show that you're not a text message person, that you're a communicator with good communication skills. You're going to have to walk in the room with some executive presence so nobody knows how old you are. And that's going to be one of those secrets. You're going to have good leadership skills. And your knowledge is going to have to be so good that they forget that you're 20. In fact, I can tell you, I was in one of these executive architect roles where everybody was 50 plus years old. I was 34 years old at the time, and my manager, who was a VP at Cisco, says, I'm still the youngest guy here, right? I'm 45. And I was 34, and my executive coach kicked me under the table. And I knew what she meant. She said, don't tell anybody my age. I also, when I was in my early 20s, had senior and principal architect roles. And the answer is yes, you can do it. But I will tell you that I spent a lot of money on training. And I will tell you that when I was your age, in fact, as soon as I left medicine and went into tech, here's what I did for 6 months straight. I spent 3 months where I locked myself in a room for basically 8 hours a day and either attended boot camps or studied on my own. When I was done that, my manager said, Mike, I need a CCIE. So what did I do? I woke up at 5 and 6 o'clock every morning. I studied CCIE books for 3 hours. I then worked basically 9 to 5 or 6, got home, had dinner with my wife, until honestly about midnight. I locked myself in a room and read networking materials. And I did that every day, Monday through Friday. On Saturday and Sunday, it was a great opportunity. I woke up at 7 a.m. I locked myself in a room, and I used to rent the Cisco router rack from CC Boot Camp for $200 a day. And between 7 a.m. and about 9 or 10 o'clock p.m., I studied and or did labs. And within 6 months, I passed the CCIE. I was a senior network architect. I was young. And I remember I left that job a year later. I was a principal architect. I was very young at the time, mid-20s at the time. And I was consulting to people that had 20 years of engineering experience every single day. And one day, one of my managers says, Mike, I just noticed you look young. How old are you? And I told them my age, and they laughed. They're like, and it was like they forgot. I was 1.5 years experience as an architect, but consulting to people that had 20, 30, 40 years experience. So if you're good and you're great, yeah, absolutely you can.
Sound advice. Thank you for that, Mike. Let us take a look at the next question. You guys are doing fantastic today with being so inquisitive. This is from Tam Wo again. Yep. Let's go to the next question, please. All right. From Walking Edits, that we did that one. From Sergio, do you think that a transition from being an IT project manager helps to become a solution architect?
Well, I think training to be a solution architect makes you a solution architect. I think fixing engines on an airplane doesn't turn you into an airplane pilot. I think being a physical therapist, and I love physical therapists, they've helped me very much, does not make you a physician. I think working as a legal assistant doesn't make you a lawyer. You go to law school. So yes, I think it's possible that you can go from any career to anything. I mean, Jennifer was a mental health tech. Al was a sales rep. Noah was a social worker. Yvonne was a waiter. Daniel Bosa was selling shoes at Nordstrom. Delroy Bat was an emergency medical technician taking people back and forth on hospitals. Richard was working in a fraud department in a non-tech role, Richard Ferrara. So it doesn't matter your background. What matters is what you're training on. That's what matters.
Exactly. And next question is from JDF_trades. All the tech jobs show so many requirements, and most are separate roles in one job description.
So I've never seen an accurate job description in my entire life. Not once, not ever. I have never had more than 10% of the skills. So there's a really good IT recruiter. Her name is Christina Marino. She's the CEO of ITXO. I know her well. She's placed so many people that I've called and recommended on my behalf, people that I knew that could do the job. And every time the company gives her a job description. And every time me or any of my people had said, we call Christina and say, what does the manager really want? And she's like, oh, this is what the manager wants. Here's the job description. So what do? Well, we're going to put a link to the video of me asking the hiring manager. So I worry about what the hiring manager wants. Quite frankly, I don't apply for jobs. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't apply for jobs, but the job description is meaningless garbage that's entered by somebody. It's cut and paste from another thing. And then the internal recruiters or HR are going to go based on this job description. And then you're going to get auto rejected. I teach my people how to build the network of recruiters, how to build people to actually get you to the hiring manager. So if Mark is going through Christina Marino at ITXO, I'm going to interview Mark because she told me he's awesome. She's going to say, Mike, I want you to talk to Mark. He's a CCIE. He's got this background. He's a rock star. Talk to him. I'm going to talk to Mark, and I'm going to like Mark. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call HR. I'm going to say, Mark, I'm going to hire you. Then, Mark, now you need to fill out an application. It's formality. I'm already hiring you. Then I'm going to call HR. I'm going to tell HR I am hiring Mark Milovanovich as a network architect. He's got some skills that are far above the on. I want to pay him this, which is 1.3 times the average architect salary. That's called the comp ratio in HR. I need the package within 2 weeks. I also need to give him 15,000 options, and I want to include this and this. Now, I hired Mark. Mark totally avoided that stupid job description that's meaningless. He avoided that ridiculous auto rejection and application process. Now Mark's working for me. Mark's happy. He's having a good time. About a month later, Mark gets an auto rejection from HR, but it doesn't matter because Mark's working for me and it's a silly automated email because he didn't pass the job description, but he got hired for the job. So I have never looked at a job description. First job, what they wanted 15 years experience. I had none. The next job, they wanted 15 to 20 years experience. I had 6 months. I don't worry about job descriptions. I worry about being exactly what the hiring manager wants. I worry about having the skills that are so good that the moment they meet me, they need to hire me and they're willing to pay me. I know what hiring managers want. I know what they need, and I make sure I can do the job or I don't actually go on that interview. And that's why I've never been in an interview where I didn't get hired. But don't worry about a job description. You want the job description of a cloud architect? I gave it to you. You want to go look at that CIO magazine article, the people that are doing the hiring that let it? Chris from my team popped the link. Don't worry about cut and paste thing because we're too busy or too lazy, whatever the case is, to write a job description. And I'm guilty of cutting and pasting too.
JDF, the reality is, and I want you to think from it, if you were a business owner, would you not want everything and the kitchen sink and get it for cheap or close to nothing? I mean, who wouldn't? If I can get a CCI on a staff that not just knows routing and switching, but knows data center, security, they know on top of that, what else is there? Collaboration, voice, video, and I can get them for $10 an hour, why wouldn't I? Heck, I'll take them immediately. I'll take 5 of them. Just throw them my way. I'll take them all if I can get for that money. So that shows you from a business perspective as to why you get everything listed and the kitchen sink and everything else. But also something else. They don't know half the times what they want and what they need. So you could always take this approach. As an architect, again, part of your job is to find out what is it that the customer, or in this case, the customer is the potential employer. Find out what they need. Demonstrate your skill in that way. And you know what you'll most likely find out? That the 99, or maybe, let's not go to high, let's say about 90% of that job description is just like Mike said, copy and paste. It's irrelevant. They didn't even realize really what they needed. And it is your opportunity, depending on if you want to work for a company like that. Because remember, it goes 2 ways. You're also examining them to see if they're a good fit for you, just as much as they're supposed to be examining if you're a good fit. And if they're good at their job, they're also going to try to sell you on why the company is good and why you should work on it. Take that opportunity, find out exactly what they need, and then demonstrate to them. This is where the competency comes in as to why you are the best fit. But aside from that, don't concentrate on everything on the job description. Me and Mike, we're always talking about this. Even us today, we wouldn't qualify for half of any of the job descriptions out there because, number one, we don't have 50 years of experience in something. It's just impossible to a certain extent. So you can be that trusted advisor. You can be the person that guides and takes control of the conversation and demonstrate what you're capable of and how that fits within that particular role. Don't be afraid doing that.
Yeah, and sometimes they come up with these catch-all job descriptions to get people from a wide variety of backgrounds because they're looking for smart, adaptable, fungible type people.
I love that term, fungible. We know who coined that. Anyway, a question from Jimmy. How long does a masterclass take for Enterprise Architect, and is it self-paced or scheduled?
Okay, Jimmy. So our Enterprise Architect classes, like our Cloud Architect classes, like our AI Architect programs, are all live. Meaning we have 3 classes per week. They're typically 2 hours. The Enterprise Architect one has much more because it's the cloud and enterprise work. There's also approximately 800 hours of additional work you can do behind the scenes in previous classes. How long does the class take? Until you are hired. Why is it? I am sick and tired of all these boot camps out there that charge people a lot of money, and when they're done the program, they have no skills and are not hireable. So anybody that takes our course can stay in our program until the day they are hired. So most people in a good economy take 6 to 12 months, but it's based upon how fast people learn. If it takes you 15, 16 months because you've got a full-time job, I don't care. You're still in our program. When you take one of our programs, you have unlimited time in the main parts of the program, not all the parts of the program, but in the main parts of the program to attend the program until the day you are hired. And that's typically, I'd say, between 6 and 12 months. Right now, the economy is a little challenging. So I'd say 8 to 14 months, but normally speaking, 6 to 12 months. We're the
And
anti-boot camp. If you train with us, you can stay with us until you're hired.
just want to add, number one, Jimmy, thank you for connecting with me on LinkedIn. Really appreciate the nice words that you said in regards to the Azure Bootcamp. Really appreciate it. And to answer your question is exactly what Mike says. It is on demand. So that part you can pace, you can build yourself up, you can ask the questions. When it comes to the live though, of course, take advantage of being able to ask questions. That's really what the live session is for there. So it's a little bit differently structured than the actual on demand, right? Which is going to have more of a stringent or strict kind of structure to it. But with the live classes, you can ask your questions. You can test yourself on your understanding of the different theoretical concepts of what it means to be an enterprise architect, including technical and non-technical aspects. So just keep that in mind. And once again, thank you for connecting with me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next question, please. From Amari, it sounds like from your presentation that the quality of your training is above what is needed to obtain these roles, or at least stronger than the average of those holding these roles. Is that right?
So, Amari, yes, we provide far more training than most people actually need. And many of our students get these architecture roles and they're like, Mike, you trained us so much. And what I'm doing is PowerPoints and sales presentations and entertaining clients and telling jokes and doing these things. Why'd you give me so much training? So, Amri, here's the reason I give people way above what they need. Because a lot of the people we work with have never been in tech before. And now they go on an interview. And when you're not experienced and you're going to a hiring manager, you have to eliminate any level of doubt that they have that you're the right person. So what are the things that hiring managers care about? First, they care about your ability to do the job and do it well. But they also care how you communicate, because your communication has an impact on whether you make errors or not and team performance. They care about your executive presence. They care about your emotional intelligence. They care about your energy, your enthusiasm and passion for the role. They care about how you lead others and what kind of a team player you are. Now, if you're an architect, they also care about your business acumen, your sales skills, your executive presence, your business acumen. So by giving people far more than they need, when a 20-year-old Daniel Bosu goes on an interview with JP Morgan Chase Bank, who didn't even graduate high school, by the way, and they talk to this person, they're like, oh my God, who are you? How did you learn this? What do you know? And then they hire them. So if you're going to have a little adversity, and a little adversity is not having experience, how do you get past it? You be better than the rest. So yes, I give people far, far, far more than they actually need from the majority of architecture roles. I don't prepare people for engineering. I prepare people for architecture.
All right, great. Let us take a look at the next question, please. You guys are on a roll today. From Prabsharan. By the way, nice to see you, Prabsharan. He's asking, I've been tracking my LinkedIn and I see recruiters checking my ID, but not reaching out to me. Could I be doing something wrong? I don't have a tech background and it is on there. Could that be?
So it could be a lot of things. What'll happen is there's going to be some people that have automated bots that are going to reach out to you and look for certain things. Sometimes they're going to look and they're not going to like what they see. Sometimes they're just shopping around and trying to figure out what they may actually need in the future. Prab, I'll actually have to look at your LinkedIn profile, and I know you, so I will look at your LinkedIn profile and see what's actually there. So that's really what it's like. Plus, you may need more than the 5 or 6 months that you actually have. I know you, and you're incredibly smart, incredibly motivated. I know that any company in the world would be lucky to hire you. I'm still not sure that you don't actually need an extra month or two of training, but I still have a lot of strong sense of where you're at and your capabilities, which are extremely good. But I'll actually look at your LinkedIn profile and send you a message on Slack, since I know you.
Yeah, and in the meantime, Prabsharan, just focus on continual improvement. Get your engagement out there. That's probably also one of the reasons you start seeing those hits, is they see the type of people that you're engaging with and also some of your insights into it. But don't necessarily put too much stock in that right now. Just focus on presenting yourself as the competent architect that you are aspiring to be. Next question. From JDF, how would you overcome scrutiny if you completed 5 different roles in 10 years?
Well, you're going to need a story as to why. So 5 roles, 10 years, we can get past it. 5 roles, 3 years, ooh, that's going to look really bad. So the question is why? Why did you leave these roles? Did you have a rationale? Was it not the right role for you? Was it something that you wanted to do differently? Now, if you had the same role 5 different times, meaning cloud engineer, cloud engineer, cloud engineer, cloud engineer, cloud engineer, that's going to concern me. And then you're going to need a really big rationale why. But if you had a cloud engineer some job somewhere, and then you had a senior cloud engineer somewhere else, and then you had a principal cloud engineer somewhere else, well, it's progression and you're moving, and now you're moving into management. So there is that. So it's really about, what is the rationale? Early in my career, I'll be honest about it, I went to MCI WorldCom. I actually loved it there. I had this guy Devendra who was an incredible manager. I was there for 3 months. I was prepping for my CCIE at the time, and the next thing I realized, I got a call from Christina Marino. This guy Omar that you work with says I should speak to you. Would you meet with this client of mine? And I met with 2 people. One was HSBC Bank, and the other was Knight Securities. Both offered me a role. And I took the job with Knight Securities. I didn't even want to leave my job, but it was 100% raise over what I was previously earning. You know what happened when I went to Knight Securities? I didn't like it one bit. They were great people that I worked with, but I had to go to Jersey City, which is New York traffic. I used to drive back and forth. It made me miserable. So the next thing I did is I went to Comcast. Of course, Comcast hired me as a principal architect. So there was a progression. Network architect, senior network architect, principal architect. And then I went to Riverstone and I stayed there. And I loved it. And I spent a few years there. And when Riverstone said to me, I noticed you've got a few jobs, I could say, let's be fair. I got my first job at WorldCom. I honestly loved it. I was planning on staying there forever, but Wall Street reached out to me and I took it. I said, I went to Comcast. I'm designing their backbone. It's not the kind of play. It's a great people. I've got great management. I said, but it's so slow moving. I said, I feel like I could do more, that I'm capable of more, that I want to do more, and I'm being held back because it's big and it's slow moving. And I really want to make a change. I love what I do, and I know I can do more. And then Riverstone's, well, we'll find a way to make you do more. And honestly, I stayed there for about 3.5 years. And the only reason I left was, they had done 13 layoffs. I wasn't close to getting laid off. I was good at what I did. People loved me. And I hadn't been back to the US, I think, in about 9 months. I'd periodically come home for a day and I'd leave. And I bought a Mac for my house. It was the first Mac. It was this Mac Pro. My wife said I could buy it. It was like $4,000. She called it cute. It had 2 processors in it, and it was green, and it had this fancy screen and little speakers that looked like little round cubes. My wife said it's cute. Go buy it. And what she ultimately did was she sent my resume into Cisco. And when I got a call from Cisco, I'm like, this is the dream company. And Cisco said, explain this to me. And I explained it. So as long as you got a story, it's fine. And then I stayed at Cisco until I retired because I loved it so much.
And the next question, please. From Mohammed. Welcome, by the way, back, Mohammed. Nice to see you. Question is, how to get an interview when applying for so many applicant jobs but no results?
So it's all about what you're doing to build the brand, to get people to come to you to show. Mohammed, I know you, and the amount of respect I have for you is great because I see how hard you work to try to piece things together given the constraints that you have. I know you're constantly showing up at aviatric stuff. You're showing up at our stuff. You are working hard. I also know, Mohammed, that English is not your primary language, and it's not the language I speak at home either. But I will tell you that I've seen some of your posts. I need you to really elevate the level of communication, even if you can find somebody that can help you edit it. Or make them in Arabic, which is your primary language, or whatever the case is. I love people that speak multiple languages, and you're trying hard, but your information needs a lot more polish. It needs a lot more finesse. And that's the missing piece for you. Your knowledge, you're really smart. Your motivation level is off the charts. Your capabilities, I know, are good. But for this architect stuff, it's about more polish. So maybe practice the language skills a little more. And I know you, and I've spoken to you, and I have tremendous respect for you. That's why I'm being so honest. Practice the polish a little bit, maybe a little bit of soft skills work. Really learn how to make things look a little better and start creating content, because with the level of intelligence you actually have and the amount of desire and fight you have in you and the will to be great, apply that to the way you show it to the world, and then people will see what I see, and then what you can achieve will be great.
Excellent. And the next question, I believe we have a couple more left. So it is from Ryan. Hi, Mike. I'm getting my AWS Developer Associate certification. What else would you recommend I do to go towards being a cloud engineer or software engineer role? I just graduated college in computer science.
Okay, Ryan. So if your goal is to be a cloud engineer, I beg you, do not do the AWS Developer Associate. I beg you not to. It's not part of it. If you had an opportunity to be a cloud engineer or a software engineer, I would pick a cloud engineer. And here's why. I expect a tremendous number of layoffs in the software engineering world. AI can code. Claude 3.5 is this point can write code that is as good as the bottom 50% of all developers. Not the top 50%, but the bottom 50%. And if you start, you're not going to be in the top 50%. So AI can already do a better job than the average developer. OpenAI now created a new model that can code with 89% accuracy, which is much greater than the average developer. And in the US or the UK, we have people that are not coming into the office, which means if you're not coming into the office, there's no reason for a company to pay, say, an American wage or a UK wage. They're going to hire developers overseas. So I would not focus on software development unless I loved software development. And if I wanted to be a software developer, I would master one or two languages and master them very well. Get your leadership skills, get your sales skills, get your executive presence, get your emotional intelligence down, your business skills. I would still skip the developer associate, and I'll tell you why. And I would do the AWS Solutions Architect Professional or the Azure Solutions Architect Expert, which is an intro-level systems administration job. It has nothing to do with architecture. Here's the problem with associate certifications. An associate certification to a hiring manager means maybe one day this person might be ready to do the job, but they're not ready to do it now. And a lot of people do this AWS SysOps Associate, Developer Associate, DevOps Associate, Solutions Architect Associate, Cloud Practitioner. And quite frankly, when I see that, I wouldn't even interview the person. So I don't want you to do this. I recommend you get one of the Solution Architect Professional things. Now, if you want to be a cloud engineer, I recommend that you master Python to be a cloud engineer. I recommend that you master Terraform to be a cloud engineer. I recommend that you master Linux to be a cloud engineer, how to tune Linux, how to administer Linux. I recommend that you have a good, strong knowledge of Kubernetes, and I'm even fine with the Kubernetes certification if you want to be a cloud engineer. But I strongly wouldn't waste my time on the developer associate role for those reasons. I would do the Solutions Architect Associate, which is admin, right? The Solutions Architect Professional, and potentially for the cloud engineer, a DevOps professional, but go straight to the professional, skip these associate certifications. Hiring managers don't care about them. And these associate level certs are so challenging by the ridiculous way they write the questions, they don't check your competency. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Now, I'd still be cautious of any engineering job because AI can do engineering, and but AI can't do any architecture job. But if you love engineering, and I love engineers because they bring my dreams to reality, I want you to be good. I want you to be strong. Skip an AWS developer cert and learn how to code, to write Python and write it well. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. But associate certifications, CompTIA certifications, they don't really mean anything to the hiring managers. And no one's going to think you know anything about software development because you passed an AWS developer cert. They're just not going to think this. They may think that you know how to build hands-on work if you've got a Kubernetes certification and the solution architect professional, which is an engineering, not an architecture certification, and a Red Hat Enterprise Linux certification. Now you're looking like a cloud engineer, like a Red Hat certified engineer, not any of these little Red Hat associate administrator stuff. It's not deep enough for anything. And that's what I would do. And then you'll be a good, strong, also get good, strong knowledge of Terraform, but realistically, that's it. But you need strong certifications. You know, AWS has this free retake policy on some of these things. The number of people that are certified that actually know anything are very minimal. So focus on a big thing like a Red Hat certified engineer, get a Kubernetes certification, get the AWS Solutions Architect Professional, master your Terraform, master your Linux. I mean, get good at it. Learn Python, learn Bash shell scripting, learn Windows PowerShell scripting, and learn some DevOps tools, and you'll be a great cloud engineer, and you won't have a hard time finding a role if you do that. But make sure your communication skills, your leadership skills, your executive communication is good, and here's the reason why. Engineering roles that are not tied to revenue are easy to outsource. So I want you to be so good and so likable that you can't be outsourced.
Yeah. And Ryan, just briefly, you mentioned also that the Solutions Architect course helped you, even though we're predominantly working on architecture and so forth. And that is the idea, to demonstrate to you, you can learn the tech, you can learn additional skill sets, and be still successful as an engineer. I always like to say, you're not going to stay an engineer for very long if you truly apply the skill sets that we teach, because people are going to look at you as a thought leader and going to want to elevate you to a position where you can make the most impact. But in either case, we're very grateful that you enjoyed the content that we're putting out, and hopefully your career keeps on growing, and you're always welcome to come back and ask more questions. And if you feel that architecture is really a domain that you want to excel in, feel free to look at some of the free resources, and perhaps we'll see you one day in the course of training and be able to work with you one-on-one.
Absolutely. We're getting late on time, so here's what I'm going to suggest. We're going to answer the next one. And not only will we have a live Zoom session next week on becoming an architect, but I'll make sure we do we'll try to get in another question and answer session next week. And then after that, usually me and Mark do at least one per week and a free webinar. And sometimes we do 2 per week, because I want to make sure everybody knows where to go, how to be great, how to get the jobs they want, how to get promoted, how to earn more, because it means something to me. I had the best tech career once I learned these secrets, and I really love training the next generation of technology professionals.
All right. And the final question is from Yasmin. And I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. They're asking how to project that professional posture in remote positions and without being a native English speaker.
Okay, so a couple of things. So there's a few things you need to do. One is to make sure your camera's at the right angles. So normally speaking, I would have my camera up here, so I would take up more of the screen, but I've intentionally, with my video streaming software, lowered myself to deal with the banners, because my team projects messages. So you want to make sure your camera's positioned. When you communicate, and the language you're speaking doesn't matter, it's, you're going to make your point. You're going to pause. You're going to make your next point. You're going to look directly in the camera so people feel like you're actually looking at them. You're going to collect your thoughts. You're not going to be fidgeting with things. You're not going to be staring in 8 different directions. And I have a habit of doing it because I've got 4 different monitors I'm working with. And, my team sending me a message over here. I got a question coming in here. I can't see the question until I look at this monitor, but don't do that. I wouldn't do that if it was on an actual work meeting. The other thing, there's a difference between English not being your primary language and being illiterate, so to speak, and poor grammar. So, I speak Greek at home. And do you know what happens when I go to Greece every year? They say apopouisa, which means where are you from? Because I have an accent. And no matter how much Greek I speak at home, I still don't sound like an official Greek person. So there's that. So when I see someone that's trying and their English is not their primary language, I tend to be even more impressed with them. Now, what is unimpressive, and this is the difference between not being a primary speaker and bad language, if someone came on an interview and says, this ain't no good, that's showing a lack of grasp of the English language. And that doesn't show well. But, if I say to Mark, close the lights, he either knows what I mean, or he's going to look at me. I'm going to say, Mark, sorry, shut the light off. But he's going to know that English is not my primary language. It's okay. English isn't Mark's primary language. It's not my primary language, but we've worked on it. And that is also okay. But don't worry so much about an accent. I remember the first time I went to the Middle East and I said, Salam Alaikum. And they're like, no, they corrected my pronunciation. I was like, okay, so I got it the next time. And, I tried my best in Arabic, which is not good. And people appreciated the fact that I was trying. I did a lot of work in South America and a lot of work in Spain. And I did my best in Spanish. Occasionally, I got some words wrong. And you know what the people were like? They were like, Mike, I think it's so interesting that you're trying to learn Spanish. Here's the new word next time. So don't worry about that. But look people in the eye. Treat people well. Don't cut people off when they're speaking. That is how you project yourself as a professional. Use your time. Use your space. Don't have your stuff that's, take up some space. And that's really what it's all about. And it's a great question. And always be proud of where you're from. It doesn't matter what your primary language is. Be proud of where you're from. It's a great thing. We're all from everywhere. Mark lived in Germany. His family's from Croatia, Serbia, right? My family's from Greece, plus another country in the Middle East. It doesn't matter. That's what makes us great. So leverage from each other, learn from each other. And I wanted this to be great. Tony, thank you so much for your kind words. I love, tech careers. I love watching people build their careers. So we do everything we can around here.
Yeah. Believe us when we tell you guys and gals,
you're welcome. We
get a lot in return by being able to answer your questions, to provide you with that light bulb moment. It is very fulfilling. It is, sometimes it feels like it's the least that we can do to give back to everyone, to provide you with some guidance. So thank you very much again for your time here. And Mike, do you have any closing remarks for all the attendants?
So here's what I want you to remember. There is no job that you can't do. You can do absolutely anything you desire. What separates us is the willingness to do what it takes to get there. Figure out what you want, build a plan, get the right training, and honestly, the correct training is the equalizer that no matter where you're from. I grew up poor. I had to work 2.5 jobs to pay for school. I'm okay with it. I did those 2.5 jobs. I paid for training I couldn't afford. I took loans for it, which is why I created this course, because I don't want anybody ever to have to take loans to do what I did. I got my job. I love what I did. I paid off my loans and I had a great career. But I worked for it. I trained hard for it. And I've spent the last 2 decades trying to help other people that came from challenging backgrounds like me get to their goals. And for me, every day when someone gets hired, it's a big celebration. It's a party. It's like I did it for the first time. So go out there and get trained. Next week, we'll have a How to Get Your First Cloud Job webinar. And when I do this, I'm going to take it from the beginner perspective. And quite frankly, if you want to be a cloud engineer, everything I tell you will still work, although the skills will be a little different. And I'll tell you, you want to be an enterprise architect? Fine, we can cover those things. You want to be an AI architect? We train lots of them. But whatever we do, we'll do to get you to your goal. Next week, we'll be back for the completely free official training for the Solution Architect Bootcamp. We did a lot of fundamentals this week because I wanted to make sure everybody's fundamentals were good before we got to the next topic. Mark, thank you for sharing your wisdom with our audience. Everybody who's been here, thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you. And I look forward to seeing you soon. And if you're not a subscriber, maybe subscribe, hit the bell, like the button, like all that stuff that I'm supposed to tell people from a YouTube perspective. I'm a CEO, but I'm trying to learn how to use YouTube. Thank you all.